Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, December 18th. This will be the last board meeting of the year, so I'm glad everybody was able to make it. For introduction purposes, my name is Todd Wilchin. I am the County Board Chair this year. On my left, we have fellow commissioners, Bill Avery. It will also be his last meeting today, as well as Commissioner Deb Shore. On my right, Commissioners Roma Amundsen and the Vice Chair, Jennifer Brinkman. Joining us this morning from the County Attorney's Office is Jen Holloway. Joining us from the County Clerk's Office, we actually have the County Clerk, Dan Nolte, and Monet McCullum. And then from the County Board Office, we have our Chief Deputy Administrative Officer, Ann Ames. Now, if everyone would please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, would you please start the agenda?
A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located on the wall at the rear of the hearing room. Additionally, a copy of our material to be discussed at today's open meeting is available from the County Clerk's staff at the front of the hearing room. The material can also be viewed on the county's website at lancaster.ne.gov. Agenda item 1 are minutes. Approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held on Tuesday, December 11th, 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the last Board of Commissioners meeting held last Tuesday. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Avery?
Yes.
Brinkman?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes.
Amundsen?
Yes.
Wilchin?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 2 are claims. Approval of all claims processed through December 18th, 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve all claims processed through today. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Brinkman?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes.
Amundsen?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Wilchin?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Next is number 3, special presentation, Lancaster County Visitors Improvement Fund grant of $10,000 to Lincoln Children's Museum for the American Ninja Warrior exhibit. Lindsay Bartlett, Director of Community and Learning for the Lincoln Children's Museum, and Lynn Ireland, Chair of the Lancaster County Visitors Promotion Committee.
So, come on up. Is she on her way?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, we can go ahead and move on
Okay,
to items B and C and then come back.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next is B, presentation of the Commissioner's Award of Excellence for November 2018 to Renee Felder and Taryn Tolliver, Community Corrections in a category of productivity.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Would you like me to read this first? Is that?
Yes, please.
Okay. The team of Renee Felder and Taryn Tolliver have been selected as Commissioner's Award of Excellence winner for November 2018. Renee began working for the county on April 28, 2006, and Taryn on February 14, 2008. They both work for Community Corrections, were nominated by Community Corrections Director Kim Etherton. In the summer of 2016, Ms. Felder and Ms. Tolliver approached the Community Corrections Director with the idea of providing outreach to unrepresented, low-income, vulnerable adults who are having to navigate the criminal justice system when they are confronted with low-level misdemeanor law violations and infractions. It was determined that the ideal time and location would be over the lunch hour at Mount Talbot Kitchen and Outreach. The outreach activities began after Ms. Felder and Ms. Tolliver received permission from Mount Talbot administrative staff. This team of 2 has set up a table and computer at Mount Talbot Kitchen every other Wednesday from 11 to 1 for the last 2 years. They help to look up the status of criminal justice cases and assist with completing applications for community service if there is an outstanding fine that can be resolved. Ms. Felder and Ms. Tolliver can search for any active warrants that need to be addressed and often share information about other community resources when discussing options for resolving a case. Ms. Etherton states, as the Director of Community Corrections, I am humbled by the compassion these staff demonstrate for the disenfranchised in our community. I am grateful for their dedication to improving the lives of all members of our community, and I appreciate their drive and extra effort put forth to make a difference. Renee Felder and Taryn Tolliver are outstanding ambassadors for Lancaster County and the Department of Community Corrections. For these reasons, we're pleased to award Renee Felder and Taryn Tolliver with Commissioner's Award of Excellence for the month of November 2018.
I just want to thank these two for coming to me 2.5 years ago, asking permission to give this a try. It was obvious to me then, it's obvious to me today that it's their compassion that caused them to think outside the box, both recognizing that community corrections can do more with limited resources, and this was one of those things that they really believed that they could make a difference by being at Matt Talbot a couple times a month to help out. So I deeply appreciate their dedication.
Great.
This we give you in recognition and with gratitude for your work. Couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much.
And Taryn, you get me. Yay. Yay. Taryn, I wanted to thank you so much for you've been involved in this for about 11 years, right?
Yes.
In February, it'll be 11 years.
Yeah.
And you know, this is just a little great idea that both of you did. And sometimes, you know, just like a stone that you drop in water, there's ripples that spread across. And it was a simple idea, but it's made a huge difference for so many people. And just want to thank you for your compassion for the people, for your dedication to service to Lancaster County, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Renee or Taryn, do you want to say any words in response?
No.
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity
Over
to
the
do
mic.
this. I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to serve our community. Just like Kim said, it's humbling for us to be able to serve at Matt Talbot and reach out to people that otherwise may not get our services. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. And on behalf of the county, I want to say that we very much appreciate your work, especially you and your colleagues at Community Corrections, because the Director Etherton is correct that there's a lot more to community corrections than just office work, and a lot of it's engaging in the community does make a difference, especially when we do have limited resources, and Matt Talbot's is a great place where you could reach a lot of individuals who need assistance, especially if they have issues with substance abuse or other issues that may affect their the outcomes of their lives. So, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
ladies.
Thank you.
Next is recognition of Ken Huskenveld, County Engineering, for 40 years of service. Pam Dingman, County Engineer.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. So today I wanted to take the opportunity to recognize Ken Husenfeld, who first started working for the county in 1974, and then I believe you left for a brief time and came back in 78. He actually rates 7th in seniority in county engineering. Many of his peers are here today to congratulate him in his retirement. And so I'm going to be really sorry to see Ken go. He's one of our best operators, and it's been a pleasure to work with him. He's always smiling like this, even when the weather is terrible and he has some horrible job to do. As many of the guys are still happy. I don't know why you guys are happy when I give you horrible jobs to do, but started initially as a laborer in 74, and I hope I don't out you with this, for $3.04 an hour.
My gosh.
Right? That was
Isn't that
hard work,
crazy?
wasn't it?
It was.
And so is retiring this month as an operator too. His service to the county has been described as very dependable, that he does very good work, and he's taken very good care of our equipment. So, Ken, congratulations.
Thank you.
If I could also ask Ken's peers who are here today in support of him to stand in the back of the room, that would be awesome.
Oh,
Hey, guys. Oh, wow.
when people like Ken work for the county, it's their whole family that works for the county, and a lot of people don't realize that, how many over the years 4 a.m. calls have you taken, how many late nights, how many Christmases or Thanksgivings did you maybe have to move snow or go out in floods, and so it means a lot to the community, it means a lot to me, and I'd like to thank you and your family for your dedicated service.
Thank you very much.
Ken, you have anything to say?
Just a couple things, if that's okay. Want to thank everybody for coming here, because to work that many years, I believe it takes, you got to enjoy what you're doing. And plus, you got to enjoy the people you're working with, and that's what made it all work real good. So I'd also like to thank my family. My wife is here, Maria, and my brother Dan and his wife Mona for coming.
What's the, if I could?
Yeah.
The biggest change you've seen over your 40-year career?
Yeah, probably equipment, yeah.
There's a phone a friend in the back that shared that.
Yeah, it changed a lot, yeah, and to good. Yeah, we started out with no air conditioning and dust, and then finally got the air conditioning. That was a real good thing, a lot of the equipment.
Thank you for your 40 years of keeping our residents safe.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Well, Mr. Clerk, why don't we continue with new business? And maybe we can come back to the special presentation.
Okay. New business 4A will wait until the presentation. 4B is a request for an exceptional circumstance award under Personnel Rule 17.9, bracket B for Mandy Meyer, Community Corrections Account Clerk 3, for a one-step pay increase.
Move approval?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the request for an exceptional circumstance award. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. C is authorizing and directing the chair of the county board to correct nunc-pro-tunc a clerical error in resolution R-17-90 by interlineating 2020 through 2022 and place at 2016 through 2018.
Move approval?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize and direct the chair to correct nunc-pro-tunc clerical error in resolution R-17-0090. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. D is a resolution in a matter of approval of official bonds of elected Lancaster County officers and the county surveyor. Elected officials include Joe Nigro, Public Defender, Patrick Condon, County Attorney, Rachel Garver, County Treasurer, Daniel Nolte, County Clerk, Troy Hawk, Clerk of the District Court, Robert Ogden, County Assessor, Register of Deeds, Pamela Dingman, County Engineer, and Terry Wagner, County Sheriff. The County Surveyor is Kenneth Schroeder.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the official bonds for the elected officials and the county surveyor. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. E is a resolution in a matter of annual salary increases for appointed directors, assistant directors, bailiffs, and a child support referee, correcting attachment A. All salary increases are effective December 20th, 2018.
Move approval?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the annual salary increases for the appointed directors, the assistant directors, bailiffs, and the child support referee coordinators. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. F is a resolution in a matter of fixing the date, time, and place for a public hearing regarding a request to vacate the west 10 feet adjacent to Lot 6 IT, more particularly described in Attachment A and located in Lancaster County, Nebraska.
Move
approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to fix the date and time and place for a public hearing regarding the vacation of the west 10 feet adjacent to Lot 6 IT. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4G is a resolution in a matter of designated banks as depositories for Lancaster County for 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Amundson and a second by Commissioner Brinkman to approve the designated banks as depositories for Lancaster County. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. H is a contract with Gulls LLC to provide annual supply county corrections uniforms. This contract shall be effective January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. The cost of county is not to exceed $15,000.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract for the annual supply of county corrections uniforms. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. I is a contract with Gulls LLC to provide annual supply work clothing. This contract shall be effective January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. The cost of county is not to exceed $4,000.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract for the annual supply of work clothing. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4J is a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, Resident in Charge, Special Agent in Charge, Lancaster County on behalf of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office and the Lincoln Police Department to participate in a criminal interdiction task force. The MOU will become effective for 1 year upon execution by the Special Agent in Charge.
Good morning, Terry Wagner, Lancaster County Sheriff. We've been involved in this task force for about 5 years now. This is a sort of recodification of that MOU. It spells out specific terms of reimbursement for our employees working overtime with HSI funds. It also spells out specific equitable sharing percentages that before were on a case-by-case basis, and this sets it out for all seizures.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions for the sheriff? Commissioner
What
Brinkman?
I read in the agreement is that the share that comes to the sheriff's office is the vast majority, 60% about
Correct.
those cases, and then that the rest of the money is shared between perhaps the police or the feds.
It also depends any other agencies that might be involved. So if the county attorney's office is intricately involved in a case, then they would get a percentage, and then I think that's spelled out in the MOU. And then if another agency, let's say we didn't have a canine on duty and a state patrol canine was on duty and we used them, then that would give them a percentage of that seizure as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the MOU regarding the Criminal Interdiction Task Force. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. K is an agreement between the Nebraska State Patrol, Lincoln Police Department, and Lancaster County to provide access to the combined law enforcement information network for the Lancaster County Attorney's Office.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agreement regarding the Combined Law Enforcement Information Network. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4L is a memorandum of understanding with SHI International Corporation using the NASPRO Value Point Master Agreement number AR2488, State of Nebraska Participating Addendum, contract number 7938004, to provide strategic budgeting and planning, The initial term of the MOU is 1 year, beginning December 18th, 2018, with the option to renew for 4 additional one-year periods. The pricing will be pursuant to the NASPRO contract and bill of materials attached as part of the memorandum. The cost of the county is not to exceed $45,000.
All right, good morning. Dennis Meyer, Budget and Fiscal Officer. That item that Dan just read really means OpenGov. So today with me is Nate Olson from OpenGov. If you remember when we talked about it at a staff meeting last week or a couple weeks ago, Nate was on the phone with us. But this contract is really kind of piggybacking off of another contract for us to move to the OpenGov platform for budget purposes. So this is kind of the first step for us to kind of move somewhat into a different direction for the next budget year. I'll turn it over to Nate and let him kind of talk a little bit about OpenGov.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for having me here today. A little bit of background on OpenGov. We provide a budgeting and performance platform exclusively for the public sector, and we've had the pleasure of partnering not only with the City of Lincoln, but 2,000 other government entities across the world. And we're really focused on 3 components: centralizing and streamlining the way that the budgets are compiled and published, both internally and then externally to stakeholders in the end user audience. Standardizing the way that performance metrics, both financial and non-financial, are tracked, identified, and then reported on to a variety of constituents. And the last piece is communicating and really telling a story around the service delivery impact and great work that county officials, both appointed and elected, are doing internally, and really then engaging the community in a variety of different formats and topics. So very excited to start the partnership with the county and emulate what we've done with the city. And again, thank you for your participation and consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Any questions, Commissioner Shore?
Would you give us an example of some of those non-financial metrics that you track for other entities?
Yeah, of course. Just a few. So I'll give you an example. Thurston County, Washington created a jailhouse dashboard that allows them to track and manage a lot of the metrics associated with the success of the jailhouse. So number of inmates, vacancy beds, a variety of different things. And then we also work with public safety departments a lot of the time to track a lot of things like response times, violent crimes, anything associated with strategic priorities.
Well, Dennis just shared the financial component, so I'm glad to know there's the other side too.
Mm-hmm. I mostly just care about the financial side. So.
Well, and I think it's important to note that this tool will be not only help the county officials, and especially Dennis, do his work, but also make it easier for the public to access this information. And I think that's the whole purpose. That's kind of, we had waited to see how the city was able to implement the OpenGov, and now I think it's
right. And I think there's no doubt going to be a benefit to the county departments. Mm-hmm. They're going to be able to really kind of work and see budget information kind of in one spot, where over the years it's kind of been a back and forth between systems and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be real user friendly. So I think it's kind of a win for everybody.
Well, and it's more than just Excel spreadsheets and
yes,
much more
cutting and pasting between them. So
yep,
yeah,
very much appreciate. Anyone else?
I just wanted to say I spy the county engineer in the back, and today I feel like Pam Dingman when she says, I'm excited about our engineering contract before you. I'm excited about this. I think we're taking some great steps at the county to modernize by using some new software, and that engagement component with the community I think is going to be important to telling our story. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yep. Any other questions?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract.
With this contract, OpenGov, they've provided us their insurance. However, the main company we're contracting with, SHI, who the main vendor is OpenGov. We haven't received their insurance yet, but we're in the process of getting it. So we just ask that you approve it contingent on receiving insurance.
Okay.
I'll amend my motion as such.
Seconder concurs.
Okay, so we now have a motion and a second to approve the contract with the condition on receipt of the insurance from the company. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. M is a contract with Great Plains Appraisal Company in the amount of $4,800 for appraisal services on a right-of-way project on Lot 9 IT at North 120th Street and Interstate 80, Lancaster County, Nebraska.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract, Great Plains Appraisal Company. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4N is an interlocal agreement with the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District to provide for the Upper Salt 3A Watershed Structure Rehabilitation Project and realignment of Southwest 2nd Street at Stagecoach Road.
Lancaster County Engineer Pam Dingman. So, hey, I'm really excited today to present to you the interlocal agreement for Southwest 2nd Street, which, hey, is zero cost to the county. And as you look at the overhead, this is Southwest 2nd Street. This is actually an NRD dam. The dam needs to be rebuilt to meet current safety standards. Southwest 2nd Street currently does this dogleg. It has since the 50s when the dam was built. The dogleg that happens here to get back up the dam embankment doesn't meet current safety standards. I don't know why the previous engineer ever agreed to it, but what the NRD has agreed to do while rehabbing the dam is regrade the road and make it so that the future alignment of the road will meet current safety standards, creating a safe intersection at this location. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to fix this long-term problem for the county, and I'm also glad that we're rehabbing this dam.
Okay. Any questions for the county engineer?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the interlocal agreement with the Lower Platte South NRD. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4O is change order number 2 for County Contract C-18-354 with JK Construction LLC for granular backfill for concrete box culvert, substitute erosion control, 1D for seeding, Type A, incorporate fly ash and embankments, underrun incorporate crush service course, subgrade preparation, and remove head wall. The change order decreases the contract amount by $1,637.96.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. So I did want to talk a little bit about this box culvert, known at County Engineering as Box E117 on Northwest 84th Street. It's been a really hard construction year. We mostly did mud farming this summer, this construction season and fall. This box, we really only needed like 2 or 3 good days to get it open. We spent about 6 weeks trying to get the subgrade dry enough and finally incorporated it with fly ash and modified the site. We know we're going to have to come back in the spring and do a little more work, but this enabled us to get this box culvert open to the public, which I believe was very important.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the change order. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. 4P and Q will hold until after the public hearings. Next is number 5, consent items. Change order number 5 for County Contract C-18-220 with Constructors Inc. to extend the project completion date from November 15, 2018 to May 1st, 2019 due to circumstances beyond the control of the contractor. Amendments to the following contracts. C-18-486 with Envirotech Services, Inc., using the state of Nebraska contract number 14916OC for the Envirotech Services. The amendment renews the contract from December 15, 2018 through December 14, 2019. The estimated cost of the county is not to exceed $6,000. C-18-4 with Rick Sign recognition for annual supply plaques, trophies, and promotional items The amendment renews the contract from January 7, 2019 through January 6, 2020. The cost of the county is not to exceed $3,500. C-11-724 with Schindler Elevator Corp. doing business as Elatech, Inc. for elevator service maintenance and testing. The amendment renews the contract from January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. The estimated cost of the county is not to exceed $10,000. Utility permit number 1736, allowing Unite Private Network to install new underground fiber optic cable from north of Southwest 58th Street and West Panama Road to south of Southwest 42nd Street and West Pella Road. There is no cost to the county. Receive and place on file the following: notice of termination of county contract C-17-621 from Havelock Physical Therapy, records and information management report for November 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent items. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Would you like to go back to the special presentation?
Yeah, we can go and proceed with it. Go ahead and proceed with it.
Then we'll go back to special presentation 3A, Lancaster County Visitors Improvement Fund Grant of $10,000 to the Lincoln Children's Museum for the American Ninja Warriors exhibit. Lindsay Bartlett, Director of Community and Learning for the Lincoln Children's Museum.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Sorry about the voice. I think that Lynn is home as well with maybe some illness today. So we're excited to be working with local American Ninja Warrior and Maggie Thorne to design and create a temporary exhibit in our lower level of the Children's Museum. We will be doing this at least from March through September, possibly extending it beyond that time period depending on the success of the project. That time period is great for us for many reasons. Of course, with state basketball and the summer tourism season, we see a really increase in numbers during that time period. We serve over 6,000 member households with 160,000 visitors on an annual basis. We expect this to really increase our visitorship with the high popularity of the television show and the really great popularity of Maggie and all the great work she does for the community.
Excellent. Any questions? Okay, thank you for that presentation.
Yep.
Mr. Clerk, would you please see the correlating item?
This will be under new business 4A. Lancaster County Visitors Improvement Fund Grant Contract with Lancaster County as the sponsor and the Lincoln Children's Museum as the grantee for the American Ninja Exhibit Project in the amount of $10,000. The term of the grant is December 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the grant for the Lincoln Children's Museum. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Next is number 6, public comment. Those wishing to speak on items relating to county business not on the agenda may do so at this time.
Okay, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda related to county business? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Clerk, would you please control with the announcements?
The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold a staff meeting on Thursday, December 20th, 2018 at 8:30 a.m. in the Bill Luxford studio of the County City Building. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will be in recess from December 21st, 2018 through January 7th, 2019. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold its next regular meeting on Tuesday, January 8th, 2019 at 9 a.m. in Room 112 of the County City Building with the Board of Equalization immediately following. County Commissioners can be reached at 402-441-7447 or commish@lancaster.ne.gov. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners meeting is broadcast live on Link TV City. For the rebroadcast schedule, visit lincoln.ne.gov. Meetings are also streamed live on Link TV and can be viewed on YouTube.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and recess the county board meeting. Mr. Clerk, would you please go ahead and start the agenda for the Board of Equalization?
A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located on the wall, at the wall of the hearing room. Additionally, a copy of all material to be discussed at today's open meeting is available from the county clerk staff at the front of the hearing room. The material can also be viewed on the county's website at lancaster.ne.gov. Agenda item 1 are minutes. Approve the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held on Tuesday, December 4th, 2018.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from our last Board of Equalization meeting held on Tuesday, December 4th. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 2 are additions and deductions to the tax assessment rolls.
Move approval of the additions and deductions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the additions and deductions to the tax assessment rolls. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 3 is a public hearing, motor vehicle tax exemption applications for Wyuku Cemetery and Funeral Home, St. Mary's United Methodist Church, Boys and Girls Clubs of Lincoln, Lancaster County, Community Action Partnership of Lancaster and Saunders County, Great Plains Community Church, Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary, Centerpoint Inc., and Indian Center.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for the motor vehicle tax exemption applications. Anyone in the audience wishing to testify in support, in opposition, or in the neutral capacity on any of these applications? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Clerk, would you please continue with item 4?
Number 4 is action on motor vehicle tax exemption applications.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the motor vehicle tax exemption applications. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Number 5 is public comment. Those wishing to speak on items relating to County Board of Equalization business not on the agenda may do so at this time.
Okay, anyone in the audience wishing to speak on an item related to Board of Equalization, but not on the agenda? Seeing none, I might entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn the Board of Equalization.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Commissioner Amundson to adjourn the Board of Equalization. Please call the roll.
Amundson,
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Brinkman,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Wilchin.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the Board of Equalization is now adjourned. We can continue and return to the agenda for the Board of Commissioner meeting. Mr. Clerk, would you please read agenda item number P? I'm sorry, public hearing item number 8.
Do you have, what number are we on? Okay. This is County Text Amendment number 18008, amending the Lancaster County zoning resolution to add a new special permit for accessory dwelling units.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. I have a few housekeeping announcements first. Those wishing to testify on this item were asked to sign in prior to entering the hearing room. If you did not do so, please see a representative of the county clerk's office at the back of the room. The order of the testimony shall be as follows: the applicant, proponents of the proposed action, opponents of the proposed action, testimony in a neutral capacity, and from planning staff, and rebuttal by the applicant. You have 3 minutes to provide testimony, including any audio or visual presentations. Please begin by stating your name for the record and identifying any organization or group that you may be representing. The clerk will indicate when you have 1 minute remains to allow for the summary of remarks. If you plan to read a prepared statement or reference, display other documents in your possession, a copy must be provided to the county clerk's office for the official record. If you do not have an extra copy available at this time, the clerk's office will make a copy following your testimony. At this time, I'll turn it over to Jacob.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. This is text amendment 18008 for accessory dwelling units. So it's to amend the county zoning regulations to allow accessory dwelling units in the agricultural district by special permit. Currently in the AG district, you would need 20 acres to build a house on, with a few exceptions to that rule. Approval of this text amendment would allow a principal dwelling as well as a accessory dwelling unit on the 20 acres. As part of coming up with conditions, planning staff assembled and worked with a working group. The working group was formed in May of 2018 and consisted of 7 members. They included county residents of various backgrounds and interest. We met, had 5 meetings with planning staff and the working group, and then a public meeting was held on July 25th. The meeting was held at Gear Library. We had 10 people from the general public attend that meeting, and 6 of the 7 working group members were there. At the conclusion of that meeting, we again met with the working group and finalized draft conditions to be submitted. This time I would like to thank the working group for their time and effort that was put into this work.
Okay.
So the conditions on the ADU, we do have some changes since it went to Planning Commission. We, planning staff, after Planning Commission, planning staff then met with the Home Builders Association of Lincoln. After some back and forth with them, we reached a compromise, and the biggest change from Planning Commission to now is that the allowed square footage of the ADU went from 800 square feet to 1,000 square feet. And the basement is included in that 1,000 square feet minus utility rooms, where furnace area, water heaters, that type of thing. We also made some changes for just clarity. At the top, we have, just added 1 per lot. This is the section, excuse me. This is the section that was amended after our after our discussions with the home builders. Added a definition for bedroom, some more clarity. And then at the end, it was clarified that any of these conditions except for number 4 and number 5 can be waived. Planning Commission can waive those, and this could be final action at Planning Commission unless appealed to the county board. In addition, I realized this morning that the resolution this morning was missing a couple things, minor. Well, one is we needed to also add in the AG district of the zoning code, we needed to add accessory dwelling units under the permitted special uses. And then also we had a definition for accessory dwellings, which is basically an accessory dwelling is a subordinate building or portion of the main building for use as a secondary single-family dwelling, which is incidental to the main building. So, take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Shaka? Commissioner Avery?
Could you explain to us the reasoning behind that change in the square footage? I think it went from 800 to 1,000.
Went from 800 to 1,000. Part of it was we decided on 20 acres that you could have a little larger accessory dwelling unit and it'd still be subordinate to a principal dwelling. Also, when you're If people wanted a basement, we needed to be a little bit bigger, because, so to make it clear, if I have a basement that's 500 square feet, then my main level can only be 500 square feet. And I mean, in the basement, 500 square feet, I'm not counting the area for the furnace and et cetera.
And so then that's where your 1,000 square feet would come, by combining those two, the
Yeah,
basement and
or,
the
or
first
if I have no basement, I can have 1,000 square feet.
That's hardly an accessory dwelling.
Well, the home builders thought 800 was too restrictive when you wanted 2 bedrooms, you know, decent size living room, kitchen. They brought up a lot of it as if, like elderly parents, grandparents lived in the ADU, they might want extra space if, you know, grandkids spent the night. Originally, the home builders wanted additional changes. We felt this was a good compromise.
And is it your opinion that this does not in any way depart from the goal of a subordinate status for these accessory dwelling units?
No, I think it's still subordinate. I mean, most houses probably are, you know, at least by today's standards, I would say are probably more around the 2,000 square foot range.
Any other questions for planning staff? Okay, that, before we start the other testimony from proponents or opponents, just want to disclose any ex parte communications that the board's had.
Did you want to ask if anybody else?
I will. I'm
sorry.
just going to disclose that between the Planning Commission and today, I did have contact with the Home Builders Association and several of their members, organized by Michaela Harrison, and I think most of the board met with that group.
Yeah. Yes.
But that's the only ex parte communication that I've had. With that, go ahead and Commissioner Brinkman.
I had that same meeting on September 21st, but I also had a phone call with Mark Hunzecker on their behalf last Friday, December 14th.
Any other ex parte communication? Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the hearing for proponents of the proposed action.
Okay, we had two people sign in support, Mark Hunziker and Matt Kenning, and I'll swear both of them in together. Do you solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Yes. Good morning. I'm Matt Kenning with Kenning Design Build here on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Lincoln. I am testifying in support of the proposed amendments that we...
Matt, could you stop 1 second? Monet, could you start the timer? Oh, sorry.
After meeting with the planning department, the Home Builders Association is okay with the proposed amendment to allow accessory dwelling units in AG zoning. We believe it is a great start, and we appreciate the planning department's time that they gave us and the discussion that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for
Yes.
Commissioner Avery?
Explain a little bit more about what you mean by a great start.
It's a great opportunity for people to allow accessory dwelling units.
But you don't have plans to come back and ask for more, right?
Not at this time, no. We don't have an opportunity to build these.
And I think just for the public's, the way that this process got started was that the city itself started with the accessory dwelling units, and then the planning department thought it would be an appropriate thing to do to look at the county. And so the applicant is actually the planning department, not the home builders.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mr. Chairman, members of the County Commission, Mark Hunziker appearing on behalf of the Home Builders Association. I think maybe to address first the question about whether this is a start or a finish, we view this as a good compromise. I think the reference to a good start is to acknowledge the fact that we have always felt like the provisions that are in this regulation are somewhat restrictive. However, they are subject to appeal and to modification by the county board if requested. One of the things we asked to change at the Planning Commission level was to make some of these things less restrictive so that there would not be so many or fewer appeals to the county board to modify the conditions. And I guess from the standpoint of from our perspective, we are willing to go with this compromise with the idea that as time goes on, the county board may decide that there are just too many times when certain aspects of this are appealed and need to be modified just to accommodate such things as site restrictions and so forth that we foresee as being potential impediments to using the regulations as they're currently drafted. And so, if it doesn't result in lots of appeals that waste a lot of your time, we're good with what we have, and so that's where we are.
Are you satisfied now with the special permit process we have in place?
We think this will work. We are willing to compromise on the size. We thought about several other items that we wanted to change, and in the discussion with the planning department, we've ultimately decided let's just go with what they wanted in terms of conditions, and we compromised. We were at, I think, 1,200 square feet. They were at 800 square feet. We met in the middle on the size, and I think this is a good compromise that will at least give everyone a better feel for really how much demand there is for this sort of thing, and how often the conditions need to be modified, if at all.
Commissioner Brinkman?
Commissioner Wilchin mentioned the impetus for looking at the accessory dwelling units, but what I remember is that we entered into a couple of agreements in the last year and a half where we asked people not to use buildings that have already been built on their property as a dwelling. And so my question to you is, do you think that this process will enable people to be able to go ahead and use those and we won't have to do anything like that in the future?
I would hope so, yes. I mean, the one circumstance that was before the board when all this started, a little over a year ago, I believe can be addressed by this. The planning department has suggested that it might be addressed in a different fashion as well. So I think we're at a point where those kinds of circumstances can be addressed, and there's enough flexibility here if things need to be changed relative to a relative location to the main dwelling or things like that because of topography or sewer laterals or what have you, that you have the flexibility to do that.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Hunsinger? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in support of the proposed action? Anyone wishing to testify in opposition or in the neutral capacity? I do have one follow-up question to the planning staff, if Mr. Cheka could come up. Just to clarify, and it kind of was brought up that there might be opportunities in the future for future county board to waive conditions of this text, but just to clarify, the items D and E, which is the requirement that the owner live on the property and that there be a single access point, those two items are not eligible to be waived by future county boards.
That's correct.
Okay, so any applicant that comes forward, there cannot be any waiving of those two items.
Right. Yeah, the way it's written, those items cannot be waived. It would take another text amendment to change that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Shore?
So if the motion would be to approve the resolution with the additional notation of the ADU language in two other parts of the code, is that?
Yeah, the definition chapter and in the AG district to add it to the permitted special uses.
Commissioner Brinkman?
My question is for Jen. I assume this is what it is. We received language from you that changed the number from .049 to .050 in Chapter 13. That's really what you're asking us to adopt in addition to the sections in the special use permit and the definitions, yes?
So yeah, along with some changes that have come from, you know, some of the changes you guys saw at staff meeting.
From planning.
The ones that Tom mentioned he noticed this morning, those had gone before planning commission. They were just missed in our little process.
But they are included in the link on the agenda.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. So what you have before you is black is everything that Tom has provided before the staff meeting. Red is the additional little changes that we had discussed with planning but had been inadvertently missed. And just mainly clarification language just to move forward in case, I mean, just things clearing up like owner of the lot and filing the restrictive deed with the Register of Deeds, things of that nature. And then also allowing, instead of just the planning commission to make changes, also allowing if it's appealed to the county board. However, like Tom said, you still wouldn't be able to do 4 or 5 or change, 4 or 5. So to answer your question, Deb, yeah. So we'd have you make a motion to approve with the changes, whichever changes you guys feel necessary to make.
Okay. Any other, anybody else wishing to testify regarding this matter? With that, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Clerk, would you please see the correlating item?
This would be new business 4P is a resolution regarding county text amendment number 18008, amending the Lancaster County zoning resolution to add a new special permit for accessory dwelling units as provided in attachment A.
I will move approval with the language submitted in the substitute resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution regarding county text amendment number 18008 with the substitution provided by the county attorney's office. Any discussion, Commissioner Shore?
If I could, I know the board would like to thank the members of the ADU working group, Phil Tegler, Christy Joy, Bernie Heyer, Dan Klein, Karen Bray, Megan Sittler, and Sarah Hartzell.
Commissioner Amundson?
And I guess I just would like to say, as a Realtor, in my life, other than as a county commissioner, this will be a good benefit for many people who do want to build an accessory building on an acreage. I've had those comments come forward to me before. So I'm glad that this was able to be accomplished.
And I would like to thank the home builders and the planning staff for working together to come up with a compromise, because sometimes we're not fortunate enough to have an outcome like this. So I want to thank the staff of the planning department as well as the members and staff at the home builders. With that, Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Brinkman?
Yes.
Shore?
Yes.
Amundson?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Back to public hearings. Mr. Clerk, would you please start, announce item 8B?
This is County Tax Amendment number 18011, amending the Lancaster County zoning resolution, section 13.048, commercial wind energy conversion systems, to add a condition to allow participating properties to have a higher noise level than non-participating properties.
Okay, and we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for County Text Amendment number 18011. Just a few announcements of housekeeping nature. Again, those wishing to testify on this item were asked to sign in prior to entering the hearing room. If you did not do so, please see a representative of the county clerk's office at the back of the room. The order of testimony shall be as follows. The applicant, followed by the proponents of the proposed action, followed by the opponents of the proposed action, then testimony in a neutral capacity and from planning staff, then final would be the rebuttal by the applicant. Periodic breaks will be taken at the chair's and the board's discretion. To help expedite the hearing process, the county clerk will read names in groups of 4. When your name is called, please come forward, and the clerk will administer the oath to each group. Then the first person named can approach the podium, and the other 3 can sit in the front row. You'll have 3 minutes to provide testimony, including any audio-visual presentations. Please begin by stating your name for the record and identifying the organization or group that you may be representing. The clerk will indicate when 1 minute remains to allow for the summary of remarks. If you plan to read a prepared statement or reference or display other documents in your possession, a copy must be provided to the county clerk's office for the record. If you do not have an extra copy available at this time, the clerk's office will make a copy following your testimony. At this point, before the applicant starts, I'm going to go ahead and give the board the opportunity to disclose any ex parte communication. I would go ahead and start. I've received a number of emails that will be entered into the record. Emails from Darren Compton, Linda Woodward, Del McIntosh, Kathy Crocker, Jeff Holbert, Judy Doherty, Kay Zvolnek, Greg and Yvonne Poole. I've received 2 emails from Daniel Schmid, 4 emails from Jojen Alder. I've received a Paradise Destroyed book, and I think Commissioner Shore will disclose more information about that. And I've also received a letter at my home from Curtis and Joetta Schwaniger. Then also I did have 3 phone calls, 1 phone call with David Levy, 1 from Josh Moaning, and another one from Mark Hunsinger. With that, I will.
Well, you were very busy. I had a conversation with the Dabbs family, and I think I got a call from David Levy, and that's the full extent of my contact.
On November 8th at 6:30, I attended a meeting at the home of Jojen and Larry Alder. There were 25 nearby residents represented, and I have their names and emails for the clerk's office. On November 20th at 8 a.m. in my office, I met with representatives of Next Era Energy, Kimberly Dickey, Dave Levy, and David Kuhn. I met with fellow commissioner with Joe and Samantha Dabbs in our conference room on December 11th. And then also there was an early reference to a book that we received in our office. One was addressed to me and one was addressed to the county board from Karen Meyer. The book is Paradise Destroyed.
I also received emails from Kathy Crocker, Heather Scott, Darren Compton, Linda Woodward, Jeff Hurlbert, 6 from Jojen Alder, 1 from Larry Alder, and 1 from Judy Doherty. I received a voicemail from Roger Holsing of Cortland back on September 25th. I met with Samantha and Joe Dabbs on December 11th and had phone calls with David Levy on December 12th and Mark Hunziker on December 14th.
Okay, I had many of those also. Samantha and Joe Dabbs on December 11th, Dave Levy and his staff in October. I'm not sure what date that was. It was probably the same date when he met with many of the others. Several conversations with Jojen Alder and emails. I visited also with Dave Levy and his folks. Let's see, Elder and Diane Hansmeyer, I received emails. Chris and Carla Hansmeyer, Dennis and Carol Palmazzo. Jojen Alder, I mentioned her name already. Ray Bloom, Karen Meyer, with the book also, Paradise Destroyed, and Michael Feeney. So.
I also want to mention that I attended the open house hosted by Next Era in Hallam on October 10th.
And I did that also, yes.
Okay, any other ex parte communications?
I did not read all my email correspondence into the record, but they are similar to what has been expressed by other commissioners. As the majority of them were addressed to commission, we all received the same emails.
Well, and the ones that I've addressed are the ones that were sent directly to me, not the ones that were sent to commission. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing with the applicant. Ms. Clerk, would you please swear him in?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is David Kuhn. I'm with NextEra Energy. I know I came before you, I think it was back in September, to introduce myself just briefly, but it's good to see you all again, introduce myself and the company and this text amendment in a more formal setting. Just first, I think it's probably appropriate to talk a little bit about our company. NextEra Energy Resources, like I said back in September, we are the largest owner and operator of renewable energy in the world. We own what we call the Blue Prairie Wind Project, which is a project situated in southern Lancaster, northern Gage counties. We acquired this project from Volkswind in 2018, but we own the project now. Volkswind has sold all of their assets to us. So Volkswind and NextEra are not affiliated with each other. We are not Volkswind. So for all intents and purposes, they are out of the picture. Talk a little bit about our generation fleet. We've got over 19,000 megawatts of generating capacity across North America, and 95% of that is clean energy. Specific to wind, we've got over 120 operating wind energy sites across the country. That's over 10,000 turbines that are operating, and over 13,000 megawatts of wind capacity. Specific to Nebraska, we've invested over $400 million in the state to date, and we are excited and looking to do more. Very important third bullet here, we have our core values really guide our development process. Core values of do the right thing, treat people with respect, and strive for excellence. And that's evident in the fact that we were named one of the most ethical companies for the 11th consecutive year. So our core values are very important to us. We're here today seeking a single amendment to the existing zoning regulations. What we are proposing is merely a distinction for your noise ordinance on wind energy, a distinction between participating and non-participating landowners. We're asking that participating landowners be assessed under a 50 dBA around the clock maximum noise limit, consistent with regulations across Nebraska. We are not asking to change any noise standards as it relates to non-participating landowners. We can, staff can help clarify what participating versus non-participating is, but just to mention it up front, a participating landowner is someone who signs a contract with our company, with Blue Prairie, saying that they either want an easement on their property. There's several different ways to participate. You can sign an easement with us, which gives us certain rights to place infrastructure on your property. But you can also sign a simple agreement that says, you know, we have no rights to put any kind of infrastructure on your property. We have no easement on your property. But you wish to be considered a participant. And, you know, obviously all of these agreements tend to have, you know, a compensation package associated with them. By signing such an agreement, you would therefore become a participating landowner. If you refuse to sign that, and if you're not interested in signing that, you would be considered a non-participant, in which case you would be protected under the existing regulations. There's no change for non-participants. So why are we seeking this proposal? Really, we're trying to strike a balance here between folks in the county that are seeking to use their property to capture the economic benefits that renewable energy provides, with those who do not want to be bothered by, you know, wind turbines. This proposal, by allowing participating landowners a higher noise limit, what you're doing is you're giving them the flexibility that they need in order to realize the investment that they've made by signing an agreement with us. Without the change, without the distinction, the regulations are essentially prohibiting them from being able to realize what they clearly want by signing up to participate in a project. So this proposal restores that property right and provides the flexibility that they need to be able to use their land that way. And as I said, it doesn't change anything for a non-participant. The current research supports this higher level. We worked very diligently with staff. I'll talk about this in a moment, but sufficient to say the 50 decibel limit that we're proposing is fully supported by scientific research and literature. And as I said, there's no change for non-participants. If you are not interested in participating, you are going to be assessed under Lancaster County's existing regulations, which are by far the strictest that we've seen in the state. So they are very well protected under the existing regulations, which we are not seeking to change. I talked a moment about our core values, and I think that one way that we try to show that is through our public outreach. Now, this is only what we've done so far, but between now and when we would hope to permit the project, you can expect to see a lot more events. Folks in the room will have a lot more opportunities to engage with us, ask questions. But thus far, we've met with landowners. We've had 2 open houses, one in the evening hours and one in the morning hours to try to, accommodate people's schedules. We've had numerous meetings with the planning and health departments, responded to many of their inquiries. We're involved in Gage County as well, and we did present to the Hallam Board. A slide on the scientific research here. The idea here is that the existing regulations were passed clearly with the intention of reducing the possibility of annoyance. That's the clear health effect that the health department zeroed in on and sought to protect citizens against. But what the literature demonstrates is that participating landowners are less annoyed. They're less likely to be annoyed than a non-participant. And I think that kind of makes intuitive sense. If you're seeking to participate in a wind project, you're willing to accept a slightly higher noise limit, a little bit more noise on your property than you would if you're seeking, if you don't want to be bothered by one. And so the literature demonstrates that 50 decibels is perfectly safe for participating landowners, and that they are not going to be annoyed at a level that's going to be, hazardous to their health. The proposal also, I think, fits nicely within the comprehensive plan, which speaks to renewable energy, seeking to add renewable energy into the goals. And as sorry to beat a dead horse here, but we're not changing any protections for non-participating landowners. Our last slide here, I know that there have been public comments, a bunch of public comments submitted to the commission, some opposing, some supportive, but we felt that this one particular landowner's experience just more or less summarized, I think, what you would expect to see from those who are seeking to participate in a wind project. So I'll leave those comments with you to just browse through. Our proposal is supported by staff, it's supported by the health department. Our proposal is supported by the planning commission. The Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board, I'm sure you may have noticed, produced an article in support of our text amendment. So I ask that you give it that consideration and pass it today. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Not at this time, but we'll probably maybe at the rebuttal.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, would you please name off the individuals who signed up to testify in support?
If the first four would come up, Larry Oltman, Russell Miller, Rebecca, I think it's Seth, lives on Sewell Street, and Doug Dittman.
Good morning, board members. I'm Larry Oltman. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
If you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do. Who was the first one, Mr. Clerk?
Larry Oltman.
Okay.
Good morning, board members. I'm Larry Oltman. I represent ACDO. It's a family-owned corporation, farm corporation. We've been here since the 1880s. I represent 6 generations, and I'm in support of this. We have got a lot of farmers out here that have signed this, and there probably isn't a lot of us here because of the different atmosphere we have here. But I'm in support of this because this gives us a freedom of the participating farmers to work together. The freedom. And you got a lot of restrictions out here, but the wind noise level for participating farmers is an agreement between us farmers that want to use the freedoms that we should have to be able to work together. And it really means a lot to have this freedom to be able to work together as farmers that have signed this agreement and are working hard to continue to get this action forwarded. It means a lot financially for some of us guys, maybe not so much for others. And I do believe in the natural harvesting of wind. We've been doing it for quite some time on a small scale with the windmills that used to pump our water at the very beginning of the founding of this country. This here is a large increase, but a very, I would say, safe and cleaner energy product than anything we've got right now except for solar, which is prohibitive for cost. And it takes a lot more ground. So I'm in support of this. I've been able, with a blessing, to be able to travel some, and I have seen windmills almost on every continent that I have traveled.
1 minute.
And I wish this county would give us farmers the freedom to participate together, that are wanting to participate together. I see no reason for us not to be able to have that freedom. I can't express my concern for the safety. I have children and grandchildren, and they are all wanting this to come through, especially for us farmers. And we pay the majority of the taxes in this state, if you look at it statewide. And the income on the farms are limited at this time. And this really helps us dry farmers for income on a dry, hot year. So I'll conclude with this. I hope you listen to your planning board, because they were in full support, and you spent a lot of money for that. So I'll conclude. Thank you. I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
Okay, with that, we'll open up to questions for Mr. Altman. Commissioner Shore?
Larry, you said you represented ACDEO. Do you want to talk
Yes,
about that?
it represents my founding great-grandfather, Anton, and the next one was Kobe, and the next one was Delmer.
Okay.
And the O stands, of course, for Oltman.
All right.
So they started back in the 1880s.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Altman?
ACEO.
Okay, thank you. The next testifier?
Next is Russell Miller.
Russell Miller, 341 South 52nd Street here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm in favor of this text amendment because of the positive impacts it will have on our air quality and on Lancaster County tax base. During our September public hearings about chicken farms, barns, there were several persons testifying about air quality. It is documented that the coal-fired Sheldon Power Plant, which is in the middle of this proposed wind farm, emits annually 1,400 tons of nitrogen oxides and 1,951 tons of sulfur dioxides. Both pollutants have a very negative effect on a person's breathing, especially those persons with asthma or COPD. Wind turbines would reduce the amount of time that the coal and its resulting pollution will be needed to produce our electrical power. Less air pollution benefits all of Lancaster County residents. The part on taxes. The property where those proposed wind turbines will be located is in the Norris and Crete school districts. Approximately 70% of our property taxes are going to schools. The larger tax base that will result from wind turbines will have a positive effect on all taxpayers in those school districts. A secondary effect is that this increased tax base will not cause an increase in school enrollment that a housing development of equal value would. Thank you. It should be, I guess I just want to note that everybody benefits from a lower tax base, a higher tax base, which results in lower taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Miller? Thank you. Next testifier.
Rebecca Sate. I'm co-leader of the Lincoln chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a nonpartisan group working for action on climate change. Along with many other citizens, I'm very concerned about this issue and the effect it is already having on our state, nation, and world. It seems only prudent to move quickly toward a clean energy economy and the jobs and innovation that will entail. And this resolution is a step in that direction, and I, along with my fellow volunteers, heartily support it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Doug Dittman. I have a dairy and a creamery in northwestern Lancaster County and West Oak Township, and I've been there for 30 years. I'm not involved in the project in the south part of the county, but I feel like it's a positive change and that we're going to have to look at more wind energy throughout the county to support Lincoln. And I think I'm always curious what's in the paper when something happens, like the change in decibel levels, and I think, well, is this good or is it bad? I don't know. I want to find out. So I have visited about 5 different wind farms. Wherever I travel, I was in eastern Colorado last week, and I always stop and I spend a little time and took a video and recorded what I heard, especially this one in eastern Colorado. And I have to admit, there was quite a bit of racket. It wasn't from the wind turbines. It was from the cars, and it was the trucks going by. So I think it's relative. I mean, as farmers, the countryside is not quiet. You know, maybe there's this idea you're going to get away from it all, but there's cars, trucks, combines, our neighbors' tractors, there's semi-trailers, etc. For the last year, Highway 79 was diverted by the farm, and it was very loud. So sometimes you close windows, sometimes you do this or that. So anyway, in closing, I just want to say that I really don't see much other option. I see as carbon levels increase, I see wind power as essential. And we're all in this together. So I think personally from my own experience, what I've seen in these wind farms is there is a sound, there's a whir, there's a hum. I encourage everybody here to go and visit wind farms. But when it comes to racket, the racket is the vehicles on the highway that are passing by them. So thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Dittman?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the next 4 testifiers in support.
This will be the final 4 that have signed in support. Laurel Van Han, Lou Nelson, Josh Manning, and Matt Gregory.
While they're on the way up, I think at the conclusion of these 4 testifiers, between supporters and the opposition, we'll take a 15-minute break. And that way, it would be a good time to stretch our legs. So with that, Mr. Clerk, would you please swear in the next 4 testifiers?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes.
I'm Laurel Van Ham. I'm testifying as a citizen, and I'm also an active member of the Citizens Climate Lobby. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. I'm always kind of in awe of the privilege we have as Americans to participate so actively in the political process. You're probably aware of our situation, but please indulge me in restating a few basic facts so we can start with a common understanding. The whole Earth, including Nebraska and Lancaster County, is currently experiencing significant climate changes. This is due in large part to an increasingly dense layer of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that acts as a blanket, trapping heat and insulating our planet. The growth of that layer, in turn, is due largely to our burning of fossil fuels. Now, don't get me wrong, we have good reason to be grateful for fossil fuels. The energy derived from the combustion of oil and gas and coal has fueled the Industrial Revolution and decades of progress that have followed. But that process now threatens life as we know it, and it's time for a change. In October, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its 6th report with the sobering news that climate is changing even faster than previously believed. In November, on the heels of this international report, 13 of our nation's own federal agencies released the 4th National Climate Assessment with much the same take on our situation. Climate change is real. It's dangerous. It's serious. It's affecting our health, our national security, our agriculture, and our economy. It's getting worse at an unprecedented rate, and people are concerned. The Yale Climate Communication Project suggests that 72% of Lancaster County residents recognize that climate change is happening. And 71% even say that protecting the environment is more important than protecting economic growth. Fortunately, we don't have to make such an either-or decision. Multiple studies show that a transition to renewable energy will generate more and better jobs than are currently available in our fossil fuel economy. And opportunities such as the one facing you right now will increasingly improve not only the environment but also the economy right here in the Midwest. I strongly encourage you to support this amendment and furthermore to be alert to future opportunities to help Lancaster County assume a leading role and be part of the solution. I believe that's the kind of county we are. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Van Ham?
It's my only copy.
Okay.
Next is Lou Nelson.
Hello, thank you, Commissioners. My name is Lou Nelson. I'm a policy associate with the Center for Rural Affairs. I just wanted to echo some of the benefits that you've already heard today and add an additional one. The Center supports wind development because it brings a lot of potential benefits to rural communities and brings a lot of economic opportunity along with it. You've already heard about the potential tax revenue that is experienced by rural communities when wind farm is developed in that area. At least in 2017, according to the Legislative Fiscal Office, the state experienced over $3 million in new tax revenue, with $1.8 million of that new revenue going directly to local schools. And that's just an example from 2017. We've already had quite a bit of development in 2018. So, with our nameplate capacity tax, we we see a real benefit to rural communities, not just to participating landowners, but to communities in general. But directly with those participating landowners, they receive new income. And I can't stress this enough, that income is essential to a lot of farm families. A lot of farm families are struggling. They're struggling to keep farms going, to keep those farms within families, and new income provides an opportunity to keep those farms within those families and keep them surviving. And that's important to the vitality of rural areas. And additionally, another benefit that hasn't been mentioned yet, but one that is important and that provides more opportunity statewide, is to bring new jobs to rural communities in the form of wind energy technicians and other associated services. Right here in the state, we have at least one wind energy tech training program. I've visited, it's in Norfolk, Nebraska, my hometown. I always like to stump for it because it's a great program. But you get to talk to those students, and those students, when you talk to them, they specifically mention that they want to go back to their small towns, or a small town like the one they grew up in, right here in Nebraska. But there aren't a lot of opportunities, and they're looking for chances that will allow them to come right back to where they grew up. A wind tech is a well-paid job. It's located right in those rural communities. That's a new job, new families, new economic opportunity right there in that community. Specifically on this text amendment, I want to commend the health department and the planning staff for doing so much work to really review all the literature and review literature that they used in forming the standard in 2015. I think you have a clear point of decision here when the exact same standard, annoyance, is applied, and we see that participating landowners can tolerate a higher level, and that 50 dBA is perfectly reasonable for participating landowners and doesn't necessarily kick open the door for wind development in the county. It allows for participating landowners to work together with developers to figure out which project will work within the county. And so for that reason, the Center supports this text amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? I have one. I know I do. I don't know if anyone else has one. Just, you mentioned, because 3 years ago when we had this before us, there was the belief that the commodity prices were going to do what they did, which is, they've retreated and they've been lowered substantially. And one of the arguments that was made was that the revenue generated by these participating agreements would help offset what ended up being losses realized by farmers because of the reduction in commodity prices. Just on an average, can you tell us what the average compensation for a wind project is per participating landowner?
I can't, and that's because it's really dependent on the individual developer, individual project. Those are contracts negotiated between landowners and developers. That might be a more appropriate question for a developer, but it's not an insignificant amount. I know John Hanson with the Farmers Union. You've probably heard him speak before this body. He'll often refer to it as equivalent to a part-time job you may take in town, which doesn't provide a lot, but it provides some context.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard Mr. Hanson speak to that, and I don't see him here, so I was hoping you would be able to enlighten us with some of that information. But thanks. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Thanks.
Next is Josh Manning.
Morning, Chairman Wilton, Commissioners. My name is Josh Moning. I'm the Director of New Power Nebraska, a statewide renewable energy development organization. I'm also the Mayor of Norfolk, Nebraska. I want to quickly relay the experience of my home county, Madison County, in dealing with their enacting of wind regulations over the last few months. Their process unfolded over 8 months, during which the Planning Commission members and county commissioners visited area wind farms and studied concerns that were expressed to them about noise. At the end of a 6-month moratorium on development, the Planning Commission recommended and the county board adopted regulations with no noise limits and setbacks that are respectful of neighbor concerns but also conducive to development for interested landowners. I'd like to emphasize the point that's been made here already today, that property rights work both ways. Property owners who have interest in utilizing energy resources in a clean, renewable, and sustainable manner also have the right to pursue those opportunities on their land. And I can say that wind energy is working in northeast Nebraska. we're creating energy very efficiently in our own backyard. And in the process, we're creating new jobs, as Lou well stated, for young people in our area that are graduating from Northeast Community College in Norfolk, creating new farm income for our farmers and new tax revenues for our schools and counties. I believe the text amendment before you today provides a reasonable and balanced way forward for Lancaster County to allow for development in a responsible way. To encourage your adoption. Thank you.
Any questions for the mayor of Norfolk? Okay.
Thank you.
I guess in the interest of full disclosure, I know during the text amendment for the chicken farms, I was pointed out that I was friends with one of the individuals that was involved in the project, and I should probably disclose that Josh and I have been friends for almost 20 years. So.
And it's a big deal that he claims that he acknowledges that.
He admits it.
Yeah, he admits it. He admits it. I did want, your last question, Chairman Wilchin. There are numbers, and I can confirm this, but we've cited numbers that farmers across the state of Nebraska have collected more than $4 million in land lease payments since 2009, I believe. But I can get that information from you, and that was gathered from statistics from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Okay. And I do think we have a couple more testifiers in support who showed up.
We have two more.
Why don't we go ahead and swear those
two
in?
We've got one to speak, yeah.
Yeah.
Matt Gregory.
Oh, sorry.
Good morning, Chairman Wilchin and Board Commissioners. My name is Matt Gregory. I'm the Clean Energy Advocate for Nebraska Farmers Union, a statewide member-based organization that's been instrumental in advocating for wind energy development in Nebraska. And I'm here to ask the Board of Commissioners to support the text amendment to amend the sound regulations for participating landowners for the Blue Prairie Wind Project to 50 decibels all times a day. And I'd like to stress that wind energy is something that Lancaster County citizens want as it creates jobs, leads to economic development, and addresses climate change. According to the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies nationwide opinion survey of climate change and renewables, when it comes to Lancaster County, 84% of survey respondents support funding for renewable energy sources, 75% support regulation of CO2 as a pollutant, 70% support strict CO2 limits on coal plants, 67% support requiring utilities to produce at least 20% renewables, and 70% trust climate scientists about global warming. So far from a small percentage, there's a supermajority who care and want to see renewable energy development and climate change in Lancaster County. And looking at the rest of the state, the UNL 2015 rural poll found that 80% agree that more needs to be done to develop wind and solar in the state. And earlier this month, the Natural Resources Defense Council released a report on clean energy in rural America, and Nebraska was one of the states that it studied. And even though more clean energy jobs are located in urban areas, the ones in the rural part make up the bigger percentage of the rural economy. So last year, that was 1,443 jobs in renewable energy in rural Nebraska. And those are well-paid jobs with benefits. And I believe that we can do better. And the Blue Prairie Wind Project will help do that for rural Lancaster and Gage counties. So there will be tests that will keep NextEra in compliance with the law, but I have to say I'm surprised that there are some folks who complain about the noise when there's other sounds in rural parts of the state from trains or agricultural equipment that can be much louder than wind turbines. So a landowner that doesn't want a wind turbine on their land has the same right as a neighboring landowner to have one. So getting towards the end here, from what we've seen, NextEra has been an open and transparent in their planning process, and they're trying to be engaging and good neighbors. And if you want good neighbors, you have to be a good neighbor. So I'm asking the board to please pass this text amendment for Lancaster's economic development. And I've passed around to you 3 handouts. One was a letter to the editor that I had in the Lincoln Journal-Star. Another is about wind and ethanol and the economic benefits to Nebraska. And the other is another handout about economic benefits of wind energy in Nebraska.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gregory? Now, Mr. Clerk, would you?
Okay, the next two will be Ken Winston and Marilyn McNabb. Did both, if I can swear you both in here?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes. Here's my written testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Wilchin and members of the County Board. My name is Ken Winston. I'm appearing here on behalf of the Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light in support of the commercial wind text amendment. I provided you with written testimony, so I won't read that. I guess the main things that I wanted to talk about are just the fact that, as has previously been stated, climate change is a very serious issue for everyone on the planet, and we're very concerned about that, particularly its impacts on the poorest among us. And we believe that many faith traditions teach us that we need to take care of both the earth and those who are most vulnerable. As has previously been indicated, there are lots of indications of the impacts of climate change. There are scientific studies that have been discussed. There's also a number of catastrophic and devastating events that we've had to deal with, particularly the fires in California, the floods on the coast. But Nebraska is also seeing that. In 2012, I'm sure that folks can remember the drought we had then and the impact it had on our agricultural economy. So we need to take action on climate change. And fortunately, renewable energy is one of the ways that we can take action on climate change. And one of the good things about wind is that it does not produce the kinds of emissions that fossil fuels do. It doesn't produce mercury. It doesn't emit sulfur dioxide or nitrogen oxides. And those are pollutants that have objective health impacts and that are negative, very negative health impacts that have been linked to numerous health problems. So one of the things that I appreciate about this particular issue is the fact that the Health Department, as has been previously indicated, has done an extensive study of the potential impacts of wind development. The only thing that's been that they've been able to link to it is annoyance, which is a completely subjective standard. So the proposed text amendment would balance the concerns of those who may be annoyed by the sound of turbines with those who wish to participate in the project. And for those reasons, we're asking the County Board to approve this text amendment. I'd be glad to answer questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Winston?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Marilyn McNabb. I live at 1701 West Rose Street. I'm with the Citizens Climate Lobby, and we worry about climate change. I came to welcome the possibility of a third clean energy generation project in Lancaster County. We have LES's 2 old little wind turbines and a new solar project. If you approve the text amendments to the zoning code, and I hope you will, we have at least the possibility of a third project generating clean energy. We're living in a time of great change. One of the things we know humans do pretty predictably is that some of us fear change. If you Google fear of technology change or some combination of those words, you'll be amazed at the lists of things that people have resisted and been afraid of. The printing press, electricity, radio, coffee. A Harvard professor wrote a book about it, Innovation and Its Enemies, Why People Resist New Technologies. I live in West Lincoln, and I'm used to hearing the train whistles in the middle of the night. When I first moved there 20 years ago, they woke me up. I'd say they even annoyed me. They still annoy me, but not because of the sound, but because I know they're carrying coal to be burned and pollute the air. The scientists are shouting to us as loudly as they can in their dignified way. We have to move to clean energy. I hope you'll take a step in that direction today by adopting rules fair to landowners and that also protect the public health. Questions?
Okay, any questions for Ms. McNabb? Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to testify in support of this amendment? Seeing none, why don't we take a 15-minute break? It's right at 10:45, so why don't we report back at 11 o'clock? Thank you. Started here. Why don't we go ahead and have the clerk go ahead and resume the testimony. We're going to start with the opponents of the proposed action. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the first four names?
Okay, we have Larry Alder, Curtis Schwaniger, Joetta Schwaniger, and Larry Newman. Okay. Do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have him speak first.
Okay.
Very good, Chris.
Okay. My name is Curtis Schwaniger. I live at 3750 West Hallam Road, Hallam, Nebraska. Theodore Roosevelt was our 26th president, and this is what he said. Here is your country. Cherish these natural wonders. Do not let selfish men and greedy interests skim your country of its beauty, its riches, or its romance. Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway is a large wind developer. Warren Buffett told an audience in Omaha, Nebraska, on wind energy, we get a tax credit if we build a lot of wind farms. This is the only reason to build them. They don't make sense without a tax credit. I think that's why NextEra is trying to build a wind farm here. Just for the approximate $50 million profit and at any cost, health and otherwise, to the acreage people of Lancaster County. A June 9th issue of Wall Street Journal explained who NextEra is. One of the conclusions was they are feeding off of American families. Medevac medical helicopters are very active in southern Lancaster County. Just used them this weekend with a wreck by Hallam Road and Highway 77. We don't need a whole bunch of wind towers and more danger for them to dodge, especially at night as they come to the rescue people who really need it. And if it's a life and death situation, time is so important. Let's not put any obstacles in the way of the medevac helicopters. Federal Aviation Rules 91-119 says a helicopter must stay away from buildings, towers, and other obstacles by 500 feet. Is a wind farm worth the life of a person? I don't think so. Southern Lancaster County is far too populated for a wind farm. Put a moratorium on all wind farm development in southern Lancaster County in order to protect the county and its people from a multitude of issues. And let me go back to what Theodore Roosevelt said. Here is your country. Cherish these natural wonders. Do not let selfish men and greedy interests skim your country of its beauty, its riches, and its romance. You have the ability to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Schwaniger? Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Larry Alder, 2498 West Dash Road. I'm a member of the Prairie Wind Watchers. Good morning. Today I understand that we are discussing the text amendment from NextEra that would make it easier to place wind turbines in Lancaster County. I also understand that the modeling says the setback will be 1 mile, which is too restrictive for this project. I've heard this over and over. We heard this through the whole discussion. They say the modeling shows us 1 mile setback. I, for one, don't trust the modeling. Just like we just said, don't you think that a company of this size, the biggest renewable energy company in the world, with over 10,000 turbines operating here in this country, could tell us exactly what the setback is, or precisely, or better than a model of what the setback for the sound level at 1 mile is, at 1,000 feet is? I've asked some of the questions to NextEra, and I haven't got an answer. The representatives say they want to be transparent and respectful. Once again, I've asked certain questions and I can't get an answer. Maybe you guys can for me. One of them is, what is the noise level of one of the turbines that they're using in this project at 1 mile and at 1,000 feet? That's where we're setting these things at, 1 mile and 1,000 feet from my property line. What is the sound level? Another one I'd like to see is what is the safety, the manufacturer's safety setback for these turbines. I emailed GE and I haven't got anything back from them either, but that's something I'd like to know. I think it's important. So that once again, what is the safety setback from a GE 2.5-127 wind turbine? That's the one that we've used here, the state has used, or the county has for their modeling. Okay. If you guys can find that, that'll be great. Another thing, I talked to David Kuhn. We both went to that meeting, like you said, in Beatrice. We ended up both at the wrong library, so we were the only ones there. So we got to speak. Anyway, I told him there's a lot of opposition in this area to the wind farms, mainly because of Volkswind, how they came in and backdoored us. But we got to talking, and he said, Larry, he said, with your regulations, he said, there won't be a turbine within 1 mile of your house. I said, really? I said, if you can promise me that, I said, there'd be a lot less opposition to you. He shook my hand and guaranteed me. He said, I guarantee you, Larry, there won't be one within 1 mile of your house. So I went home, I emailed him, and I said, if you can put that in writing for my group, there would be a lot less opposition. Well, I didn't get the answer I wanted. I got Larry. I didn't mean to mislead you. That's only if we use this turbine with this noise level and this and all this stuff again about the modeling. I urge you to anything you get it in writing. This is a big deal. This is going on. These are going to be here. These are 500 footers. They're going to be here forever. This is a big decision. If we're going to do this project, let's make sure we do it right. Thank you.
Any questions from Mr. Alder?
Thank you.
Adler, sorry. Can't read my own handwriting.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Joetta Schwaninger, 3750 West Hallam Road, Hallam, Nebraska. Of extreme concern is the problem with infrasound and low-frequency noise. Wind turbines convert 40% of the wind's energy into power, but 60% into infrasound. Infrasound is too low on the sound scale to be heard. It's between 0 and 20 hertz. Just because you cannot hear it doesn't mean it can't hurt you. We can't see gamma rays or X-rays, but they hurt us. Infrasound is pressure waves, bombarding and penetrating the body. One of the pioneers in infrasound research was a French scientist. His interest in infrasonic waves first came about in the 60s when he and his laboratory assistants experienced shaking lab equipment and pain in the eardrums, but his microphones did not detect audible sound. Dr. Mariana Alves Pereira, I can't say her last name. Anyway, I'm going to call her Dr. Alves, who has a Bachelor of Science in Physics, a master's degree in biomedical engineering, and a PhD in environmental sciences, and who has studied infrasound and low-frequency noise for 30 years, said that prolonged exposure to infrasound and low-frequency noise causes tissues in the body to become thickened. This is seen in blood vessels, cardiac structures, trachea, lung, and kidney of both humans and animals. Depressions, increased irritability and aggressiveness, a tendency for isolation and decreased cognitive skills, thinking skills, are all part of the clinical picture of vibroacoustic disease, and that's what they call the infrasound low-frequency noise, vibroacoustic disease. In a study with rats who had prolonged exposure to infrasound, the little cilia in the part of the ear containing the cochlea became fused. They could no longer produce electrical impulses to be sent to the brain. Obviously, the rats became deaf. The A designation is a filtration formula including only audible sound between 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. Infrasound, that is, between 0 and 20 hertz, is not identified with the dBA formula. Dr. Alves says that the A weighting is not useful for detecting infrasound, that is, inaudible sound. She says it must be measured in dB linear.
Also, in measuring for infrasound, the measurement must be taken inside a structure rather than at an outside wall. Infrasound penetrates into buildings and reverberates differently inside a structure from what it does outside. It makes a huge difference. You will notice, can you see that? Did I place it right?
Just wait. Now we can see it.
Thank you. Okay. On page 4 of your report, this is a report that was done in Ireland from July to November of 2017, and they took measurements. And on page 4, the house is from the nearest turbine is 590 meters, which is a little over 1,900 feet. And the family abandoned the home because all the family members became seriously ill, and we presume that was from the turbines. Okay, so then the next page, page 6. Okay, this is a graph. The red, can you hear me if I talk over here?
No, but just
how do I do that?
move the microphone over.
Move the microphone,
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, the red inside, okay, it was taken inside a child's bedroom. The red bars are A-weighted values, while the gray bars indicate acoustic energy that is de facto present in dB linear. In this environment, the human being would perceive through the ear an overall A-weighted pressure level of approximately 26 decibels. But while being simultaneously exposed to an overall acoustic pressure level of approximately 74 decibels in linear. So it's worse than just dBA rating says it's fine. No, it's not fine. The problem with wind turbines, is that the infrasound exposure is long-term and can travel long distances. So how far is far enough for wind turbines to be from home so as not to cause a problem with one's health? Dr. Nina Pierpont, a pediatrician who has cared for children having health problems associated with wind turbines, considers 1 1/4 mile setback as a minimum. But if in a hilly situation with sound waves cascading down into the valley, then she considers 2 to 3 miles a minimum from any dwelling. In actuality, health problems have been reported at 4.2 miles from the nearest turbine. I want to remind you of the Norris School District. Surely you're all familiar with that. It's a Class B school, so it's pretty large.
Ms. Schwaniger, can you wrap up your testimony? I'm sorry, your 3 minutes has expired.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay.
I just want to encourage you, if regulations are going to be changed, to make them even more strict than what they are currently. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Schwaniger? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Larry Newman. I'm off of 6 acres in southern Lancaster County, and so my weight in the home matter isn't a whole lot. But anyway, the carbon footprint that wind turbines leave behind is much more than these people are saying, because of the manufacture and the efficiency of them. They are from 17 to 25% efficient, so you still have to have coal to back wind chargers up. And anyway, their carbon footprint is much larger. And climate change, you guys, or those people, probably don't listen to Rush Limbaugh very much. So anyway, I'm in opposition. I'd like to keep the decibels the same as they were and not increase them, because we would be definitely a non-participating landowner, and we wouldn't have too much say after they're in the ground. I don't know how we'd hold their feet to the fire. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, any questions from Mr. Newman? Okay.
Okay, the next 4 are Darren Compton, Charlotte Newman, Daryl Schoenbeck, and Mike Woodward. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Darren's first.
Who? I'm Darren Compton. Is on my notes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Darren Compton. I'm at 7800 West Hallam Road, Hallam, Nebraska. And I'm not opposed to alternative energy. I grew up with alternative energy. I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest in the Columbia River Gorge, where they're littered with wind turbines at this point. We owned property where they were tested and developed, and with the bladed turbines have not changed much over the history of about 35 years. I've lived or visited 35 countries in my career as part of being in the military, and I'm not led to believe that there are that many wind turbines in other countries because I have not seen them. And the infrasound that Ms. Swaniger brought up, I'm a nuclear command and control guy, very low level so we can punch the water and talk to the subs. All that's true. We can't stop it. It's going to punch right through a building. It's going to reverberate around inside. Just by the technology, I can't explain it. I'm bound by secret information that I can't explain at this point. But all that is true at this point. Also, they want you to believe that it's all about annoyance. It's not. The World Health Organization has published their findings on wind turbines, and to them, any level at 42 decibels or higher does have a human health effect with increased stress, blood pressure, cognitive recognition, of course leading to cardiac disease, stroke, and ultimately later death if it continues. Thank you. We should not allow big business to pay people to increase the risk to their health. It's the industry's responsibility to build a turbine that meets the level specified by the local populace and the government. It's all about land rights too. My land rights, the property I own, I should be able to use every square inch of it and not increase my health risk. So their levels to measure to the outside of a building. I want to move my house on my property, now I increase my risk. I want to break it up and give part of it to my son, I increase his risk based on their modeling capabilities. So a lot of work has gone into where we're at now with 37 and 40. Please sustain those and make the industry meet our requirement, not us bend to their will to make money. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Compton? Okay, thank you.
Next is Charlotte Newman.
I too want to thank you for the time and consideration that you are giving to this issue. I think that it's very important to consider how huge and how permanent and how serious the proposal of a wind farm in such a highly populated area is. And I just appeal that you would take all the time that you need to consider all the serious consequences that may come from this. I too am really concerned about the infrasound issue. And we're talking here, it keeps being brought up to us that we're talking about the approval of a higher noise level for participating and not for non-participating. And we heard earlier that those who, quote, don't want to be bothered by this, they're not participating, they won't be bothered. Of course we'll be bothered. There's no way to stop the sound once it reaches my property line. And I don't know how, once these are present, how that's going to be controlled. I think it's easy to be in favor of something that I personally would never have to deal with. And people from Lincoln or from other places can say how much they are in favor of these, but they're not going to be surrounded by them. So that seems to me like those of us who are really going to be affected by them every single day for the rest of our lives, that's going to be a lot more weight than those who just say, well, I'm in favor of these wind farms, and they're off somewhere where they never have to see them, they never have to hear them, they never have to deal with them.
1 minute.
And we hear a lot about the terms of the capacity of the wind turbines, and it was mentioned earlier, the actual output of the wind turbines averages between 17 and 25%. So when we hear capacity, that's really misleading. This is just a couple of statements from Joel Daring, who lived near a wind farm, the Blue Canyon Project in Oklahoma, before he moved to this area. He says, the most intrusive aspect of living near these structures was the constant noise. When the breeze was out of the northwest, northeast, the constant drumming noise that the towers produced penetrated into our home. Closing doors and windows offered no relief. It was an intrusion from which you could not escape. Please share with those concerned that the distance from our house to the base of the nearest tower is 6,311 feet. These industrial plants should not be constructed in settled areas. And just one more statement, this from the Lancaster County Health Department. To ensure citizen health, safety, and property rights, the setbacks should correspond to a distance of 10 rotor heights, not less than 1 mile from the non-participant's nearest property line. Any zoning change that reduces the protections provided under the current Lancaster County limit of 35 dBAs at night significantly impacts the health of non-participating landowners. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Newman?
Which do you want? Everything?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next is Daryl Schoenbeck.
Hello, my name is Daryl Schoenbeck. I live at 2424 Southwest 14th Road, Cortland, Nebraska. That's in Gage County. I'm here to express my family's concerns regarding the Blue Prairie Wind Project and the zoning changes being considered. Members of the planning board, which I attended their meeting, talked about how they found a balance for participating and non-participating entities. It's also been mentioned a couple of times here today, that balance. I would like to point out that there's no such thing as a balance between residents who live in the area of this wind generation project. People that live in the area of this wind project will be participating whether they signed an agreement or not. They will be participating due to such large machines being placed in the vicinity of their homes. If wind turbines are considered agriculture or industrial, makes no difference. The effect is the same. The landscape will be changed forever. Wildlife will be affected. Common sense tells me that property values will be affected. Many people don't want to live in a wind generation area. There are also health concerns present for many people. You've heard about those today and at other times. The wind farm does not belong in southern Lancaster, northern Gage County. Setbacks cannot be set great enough in this area to protect homes and property due to the number of residents who live here. We have all been through this before, and considerable time and effort was spent creating zoning that protected all residents. Is changing zoning for an out-of-state company with deep pockets good for all residents of the area? No, it is not. I'm against any changes in the current zoning that increases sound limits. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Schoenbeck? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Good morning. Mike Woodward, I'm from Cortland, Nebraska. I'm kind of in the question mode today. A couple things I want to address here. One question that I have is with this zoning action, what we're doing is we're changing the description of a participant. In a nutshell, what's going to happen is Nextera wants to come in. They can't fit the zoning in the area, so what they're going to do is they're going to try to buy out the neighbors. That's what this is. So what kind of a zoning precedence is that going to set for Lancaster County? Are you going to allow other people in the area to do that? Other properties? Are we going to allow them to buy off the neighbors when we do zoning? So that's one of the questions that I have for you is what kind of a precedence is that going to set for Lancaster County on other property? Another question that I have is why is this company making such extreme efforts to plant this project in between populated areas? Well, it's the Howland plant and the electrical grid is exactly what it is. The closer they get it, the less input costs they have. And that's in wind energy. That's millions of dollars. So there's 42 million acres of farm ground in Nebraska, and we're trying to put this between Lincoln and Beatrice. That's why do we want to do that? Obviously it's a significant cost savings. So. Another question I have for the board, and one thing that I haven't seen addressed yet, is the wind turbine manufacturer safety recommendations. I have not seen that. You cannot find that online. Nobody wants to give that out. I think that's something that should be presented to this board. They know what they're going to put down. They put them down. They use those turbines all the time. So. Other questions that I have any of you heard testimony from either company representatives, Sierra Club, anybody that isn't being paid by these wind generation companies, give testimony that they actually live by one, that they enjoy it, that they like it? I haven't heard it, not yet. Between all the different zoning actions, I've yet to hear that. So let's see here. And then the last question that I have for you is how many actual landowners are going to be affected with this project? That's a question I'd like to ask, or have you ask, is from what I saw on the previous zoning actions and the plans, there was maybe 3 landowners that these were going to even be remotely close to their house. There's a lot of absent landowners in the area, and the landowners weren't going to place these by their houses either. So I challenge you to look at if there's any placement maps where they are according to actual property owners' residents. So, thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Woodward? Mr. Clerk, you want to call up the next 4?
Okay, we've got 3 people left that have signed in. Ann Post, Dan Schmidt, and Mark Hunziker. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I mean, Ms. Post, you're up first.
Good morning. My name is Ann Post. I'm an attorney with Baylor Ebden Law Firm. I'm here today on behalf of our client, the Prairie Wind Watchers. And today I wanted to take my time to just kind of unpack the idea of what trespass zoning is. I know you've heard from several testifiers on both sides of the issue about their property rights. And there's the term trespass zoning has been used, if not today, I'm sure in some of the materials you've received. And so I wanted to unpack that a little bit. So what is it? Trespass zoning is a situation that arises when we start to measure setback distances from the outside of someone's dwelling or a structure on the property as opposed to from the property line. So this isn't typical anywhere else in Lincoln's zoning code, but what we have is in the paragraph of this amendment before you today, we have that for the noise levels that are acceptable. And what the result is that what my neighbor would do with their property is going to affect how I can use my property, and I have no say in it. So I put together a rough semblance of a map for you to try and illustrate the point that I'm talking about. And I will tell you that this is not to scale. It's not a depiction of anywhere in Lancaster County. And so first, let me walk through what I'm talking about. If we look at this, what we've got pictured here, you see the parcels of property, a road, where we've placed the existing wind turbine. We're going to assume that it's far enough away from all our property lines. The yellow circle represents the noise limit for non-participating property owners, while the blue represents an existing dwelling. In this case, we'd say it's for non-participating property owners since it's outside that yellow circle. So when we actually look at this and how this affects property owners, because of what this property owner did, where they agreed to have a wind turbine on their property, you can see that this parcel is under, most of it is under the noise level for participating property owners. If we assume that this is 3 acres, that means this property owner doesn't have to be participating, yet they're not going to be able to build on most of their property. If they ever want to build there, they're going to have to build in this tiny corner up here. They're going to have to run a road all the way up there. And as you know, in some cases, it's hard to get water on every piece of property in Lancaster County. If the water is not available there in that corner, they're going to have a much harder time building. More than that, Lancaster County is an urbanizing county. If they ever had the opportunity to do a community unit plan where they would want to get 4, maybe 5, depending on what size of how many acres we assume this picture is, they're not going to be able to do that now because if they were to build a dwelling there, it would everyone that lived there would be subject to the health risks of this noise for non-participating property owners. So to wrap up, this is what trespass zoning is. This is what happens when we measure noise levels or setback distances from outside a structure on the property as opposed to from the property line. There's going to be another text amendment in front of you that addresses this issue, and we'd ask that you hold off on this text amendment and on vote action on this text amendment until you have a chance to consider the text amendment that will be coming before you. With that, I'd take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Post? I just have one. Yeah, wait, if you put the back up there.
Yep.
So the map the description you provided, diagram, that's as it currently exists today with the current, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, okay.
It's as it exists today, and it'll be enforced with the noise difference between participating and non-participating property owners. So right now it's all at that 37 to 40 decibels. When we change it, assuming we change it to 50 decibels for participating property owners and keep the lower level for non-participating property owners, it's just going to increase this problem, exacerbate it anyway.
Okay, Commissioner Shore?
You mentioned holding action on this text amendment. Are you making that on behalf of whom?
On behalf of the Prairie Wind Watchers group that has retained Mark Hunziker and I to represent their interests.
And approximately how many members are in the group?
There are several of us here, several here today. I think 10, 15 here today.
Okay.
I have to get a more accurate count to get back to you.
That's
right. And you made reference to a separate amendment that's been proposed.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Next is Dan Schmidt.
Hi, Dan Schmidt, private citizen. NextEra was in our area a few years ago trying to put wind turbines in, so I want to speak first toward the core values that were mentioned. They were discussed a little bit from some folks from Missouri talking against NextEra, and they testified before the Planning Commission. And from personal experience, I would just back that up. Secondly, the Health Department recommendation spoke, quote, that a significant finding was that there was 0 annoyance reported from participating members. Well, participating, in my experience, NextEra was in the area 2 years prior to most of us that lived there signing up land that that the landowners did not live there. So of course, probably over 50%, I would guess, of participating landowners do not live in the area. So of course there's zero annoyance. So I think that skews the numbers. I have great respect for the health department, but I have to disagree with them on this point. Thirdly, since 2015, information has come up, as you have heard, on infrasound. Even NextEra, the applicant, addressed infrasound in their application because they know it's a threat, because there's more information coming every day about the harmful effects of infrasound. They will say, well, there's no peer-reviewed reports on it. Well, I'm in the aviation industry, and you might remember an accident back in the late 90s. A 747 took off from JFK and exploded after it got to altitude, and it exploded. Well, there were several pilots. I was in the industry 10 years prior to that. Pilots were saying that there's a threat from empty gas tanks, that combination of mixture in the gas tank causing an explosion. Boeing and others said, well, there's no peer-reviewed data to support that. I sent some of this to you all. So just because there's no peer-reviewed reports, and those are coming, I believe, doesn't mean that there is not a threat there to health. And as a board, I would recommend to you guys to maybe err on the side of safety. You take a survey of Lancaster County, sure, they're going to go for it, wind energy. That's because the majority of you folks probably live in Lincoln. You're not going to have to deal with it. Human nature says we have a problem, I'll wrap up, sorry.
That's fine.
Human nature says we have a problem, well, let's deal with it. Well, those folks, us folks out in the country are the ones dealing with it. Infrasound is a problem. And don't vote for something that 20 to 30% of the folks that live under these things later on will attempt to move out of their homes that they've built, and they'll try to sell their homes at a reduced market value and not be able to do it. So I'm against it. So,
okay, thanks. Any questions for Mr. Schmidt? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the County Board, Mark Hunziker appearing on behalf of the Prairie Wind Watchers, whom I'm informed have at least 64 members on their email list and some who do not have email. This is a text amendment, as you know, to make it easier to facilitate industrial wind farms on agricultural land in Lancaster County. The staff report refers to noise study or noise modeling that was done for 54 turbines, each of which are larger, taller, and wider than our state capitol building. This is not an agricultural use, it's an industrial use. The merits of wind power are not the issue, this is a zoning issue. To allow an industrial use by special permit is within your power, but it doesn't mean you should pretend that it's agriculture. Moreover, the industrial use by special permit does not alleviate your obligation to protect the health, safety, and welfare and to assure surrounding property will not be adversely affected. You had this issue before you in 2015, and it was noise that was the primary issue. There were other issues that should have been discussed, but the focus was all on noise and nothing on the others. There were other things that should have been part of that discussion, such as trespass zoning, as Ann was describing, application requirements, pre-application noise studies, and so forth, performance monitoring. Once these things are built, there's no requirement in your ordinance to continue monitoring the sound generated, and enforcement. Enforcement is entirely, in your ordinance, entirely a matter of complaint and your discretion and your willingness to impose on the health department a financial burden that isn't in your budget. The responsibility to protect health doesn't go away just because people get paid to endure the noise. Finally, these are industrial uses, and they are massive in scale. The health safety impacts are on huge land areas within Lancaster County, and they diminish the potential of land that is not within the participating scope. Special permits for these things should not be easy to get. There should be serious provisions for enforcement, and those protections ought to be for both. The enforcement issue relates both to participating and non-participating landowners. We would ask you to delay this text amendment, to consider it in conjunction with a text amendment which we have proposed, which will address the application requirements, the monitoring requirements, and the enforcement mechanisms in order to protect people in the event a special permit is ultimately issued. I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Hunsinger? No. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in opposition to this action? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to testimony in the neutral capacity. Anyone wishing to testify in the neutral capacity? Okay. From planning staff? Probably assume also for health staff as well.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Tom Chaka, planning staff. I just kind of wanted to briefly go over what this application is, kind of confirm some of the things that were said. It is a amendment to the text to modify the conditions for wind energy. The one condition being modified is the noise. Would separate participating from non-participating. The non-participating noise levels would remain 40 dBA from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 37 dBA from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Participating properties would be 50 dBA all hours of the day. Just want to say that all the other conditions, and mainly they've been talking about noise and setbacks. The current setback conditions that are not changing is from a non-participating lot. The setback shall be 2 times the turbine height measured to the property line, or 3.5 times the turbine height measured to a dwelling, whichever is greater, and at a minimum 1,000 feet to property line. I would just mention on the issue of whether we call this agriculture or non-agriculture, it is allowed today in the agriculture district by special permit. We do have other non-agriculture uses that are allowed by special permit. A few of those would include recreational facilities, cell towers, healthcare facilities, racetracks, and commercial composting, to name a few. That's all I have. Chris,
do you have my presentation on there yet?
No.
Did you load it?
Sorry. Chris Schroeder with the Health Department is going to have a brief presentation, and he'll address the more about noise and the noise issues. Answer any questions while he's getting.
Any questions for Mr. Chaka? Commissioner Brinkman?
Can you comment on the arguments made about trespass zoning?
Not really. I haven't came across that before. It's never been brought up since I've been here, but I guess the only thing I would say to that is it wasn't brought up in 2015, and we measure in the code today, we measure from the dwelling, so I'm not sure if.
But to follow up on that, you just mentioned that one of the issues that we addressed back in 2015 was the setbacks for non-participating. The actual setbacks were from the property line.
The setbacks today are measured they're measured both from the property line and the dwelling, and then you take the greater
right
of it.
Right.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Good morning, Chris Schroeder with the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. And I'd just like to walk through the basis for our approval recommendation on this text amendment that's before you today. We've been hearing this a lot, but this proposed text change is asking for a higher noise limit for participating properties. And back in 2015 and throughout this process as well, we've once again identified that annoyance is the key negative public health impact associated with wind turbine noise exposure. And in our health review of this proposed text change, we sought to answer two main questions. And the first is that, does the peer-reviewed science-based literature support that participating properties report much less annoyance? And the second question, is the proposed wind turbine noise level for the participating properties, so we're talking about the 50 short-term noise limit, supported by the scientific wind turbine noise levels in the studies that we reviewed. Staff spent many hours reviewing multiple peer-reviewed science-based papers. We had to focus on papers that did examine the influence of economic personal benefits relative to wind turbine noise exposure and reported annoyance. And I'm going to discuss a few of these papers that greatly helped us in making our recommendation. The first is the Health Canada Wind Turbine Noise and Health Study. This is a large epidemiological study that examined the impacts of wind turbine noise and health and well-being. The study had 1,238 randomly selected participants. This is a very well-done study that used both self-reported data and objective measures. And when they surveyed the folks, and then again they also conducted objective measures where they sampled hair cortisol and blood pressure and those other sort of health metrics. Fortunately, during the study, and again, we had to focus on studies that looked at participating respondents. They focused on information for participants that received personal benefit, and for this, it includes benefits through rent, payments, or other indirect benefits. And those indirect benefits would be like community centers or community halls where the wind turbines are located. And the significant finding in the study relates to the participating respondents. They reported effectively zero aggregate annoyance. And for us, this was significant because the term aggregate annoyance refers to the whole spectrum of annoyance, from not at all to annoyed to highly annoyed. And this table here is from data from the Health Canada study. And if you look at the top, it has the wind turbine noise levels in the different categories, and then it breaks it out for those that are receiving personal benefit. And what is important to note with this data is that the respondents receiving personal benefit are located in the two highest wind turbine noise categories. And if you think about it, it makes sense because in general, participating properties would be located closer to wind turbines and therefore have higher, wind turbine noise exposures. So in answering our second question and looking at the proposed noise limit of the 50 dBA, we looked at the Health Canada studies wind turbine noise data, and within that data, they had wind turbine noise levels up to 46 dBA. And this is an important point to make, is that this is a year-long average for that 46 dBA. This chart here just has more detailed wind turbine noise data, and I'm just going to briefly talk about it. We can come back to it if folks would like to know more about it. But it has the top, at the top it has the calculated distance between the dwelling and the nearest wind turbine. Then on the side it has the noise levels that provides the mean noise levels at that distance, and also the minimum and maximum for that range. And again, to emphasize, this data does represent the year-long wind turbine noise levels. And again, the respondents receiving personal benefit were in the highest wind turbine noise categories. And then the proposal again is asking for the short-term 10-minute LEQ, which, you know, the short-term average compared to a year-long average. So in comparing the year-long averages for the wind turbine noise data in the Health Canada study versus the request before you, there's some things that important to note that are characteristics of wind turbines. You know, one is that they do not operate all the time and not always at the same power output. So that affects the noise levels that are emitted from the wind turbine. And then the wind direction is not constant throughout the year, which influences the year-long averages at the wind, which influences the year-long average wind turbine noise levels at the dwellings. So for us, it was reasonable to conclude that these year-long wind turbine noise averages of the 40 to 45 dBA would contain short-term 50 dBA wind turbine noise levels. The Backer paper, this is a research paper that examined a research study conducted in the Netherlands. And this paper looked at wind turbine noise exposure and annoyance. And this is a table from that study showing the noise levels in that study, in the Netherlands wind turbine noise study. And there were 159 participants in the 41 to 45 and greater than 45 dBA noise categories. And this paper also examined the influence of an economic benefit relative to wind turbine noise exposure and reported annoyance. In this paper, there were a couple of tables that are important to talk about. Table 3 out of this paper is a response to outdoor wind turbine sound, looking at the difference between economic benefiting and non-benefiting respondents. If you look at Table 3, if you focus on the rather annoyed and the very annoyed categories, there is somewhat of a drop in the percentage of folks that were annoyed. For the no economic benefit went from 7 down to the 2%, and then under the very annoyed went from 5 to 1%. Then under Table 4, this is more significant relative to annoyance, and this is the response to indoor wind turbine sound. Again, looking at the economically benefiting and non-benefiting respondents. And in those two higher noise categories, under the rather annoyed, for the no economic benefit went from 4% down to 0%, reported being rather annoyed. And then in the very annoyed category, went from 4% down to 0%. And again, same as we noted in the Health Canada study, the wind turbine noise exposure data represent long-term, year-long averages in that Backer paper as well. So it would be reasonable to conclude, based upon this paper, that the 41 to 45 dBA, those again the year-long average levels, would include and support the 50 dBA short-term wind turbine noise level for participating properties. And it's also worth noting that what's not in that table is that the Netherlands study had wind turbine noise exposure data up to 54 decibels, so higher than the Health Canada study, the 46. The Janssen paper, This paper examined two wind turbine noise studies from Sweden and one from the Netherlands. And again, this paper examined the exposure-response relationship between wind turbine noise exposure and annoyance. And this paper also focused on examining the emphasis of economic benefit versus non-economic benefit. And this is a quote from the paper. Their finding was that respondents with economic benefit hardly reported any annoyance despite living primarily in the highest exposure categories. And again, that makes sense when you think about those that are participating would be located closer to the wind turbines and have the higher noise levels. So for this paper, this helps answer our first question, in that this study's results help support that participating property owners report less annoyance. Low frequency noise, infrasound. What are the potential health effects? This was brought up back in 2015, and it's been mentioned many times throughout this process. Once again, we reviewed the current scientific peer-reviewed literature on this subject, and what the weight of the scientific evidence is telling us, and again, this is at this time, we have to use what is currently available to us. Like I've said before, unfortunately, we can't forecast science. And what these studies are telling us is that there are no adverse health effects from low frequency infrasound generated by wind turbines, and that's important to keep that context in mind. There's been additional materials reviewed, these additional materials that were submitted to us, and some of the issues or concerns that we identified with these sources was that many of them were not peer reviewed. The sound levels in these studies, we're talking the decibels, or what we call the dose of the sound, was not comparable to what the infrasound you'll see relative to wind turbine farms. The study sample size, they're often very small. Some of the studies talked about occupational, experimental exposures and not wind turbine noise exposures, and then the inadequate length of study. Our conclusions, as in the past, we relied heavily on current peer-reviewed science-based research relative to establishing a higher noise limit for participating property owners. And for us, the most compelling evidence was found in the studies published after the 2015 Health Canada study that further analyzed the data collected in this Health Canada wind turbine noise and health study. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Scott Holmes and myself spent over an hour on the phone talking with Dr. Michaud and Dr. Keith. They work for Health Canada, and just trying to get a better sense of the study's data and how to interpret it. And they were very gracious, again, to talk with us, and it was much appreciated. So we are recommending approval of this proposed text amendment because we believe that the peer-reviewed scientific studies support that participating property owners, they can be exposed to wind turbine noise levels up to 50 decibels, again, for a short 10-minute LEQ, and not experience significant levels of annoyance.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions? Commissioner Avery?
A lot of research starts out with a statement, this is neutral, we're not taking a position, we're just simply going to lay out the facts. And what happens frequently is that the report shows that the data support the position that the researchers had when they went into the project. Did you have that as an issue somewhere along the line? Did you get the feeling that, this can't, all of this literature cannot point in one direction?
Well, again, when we focus on the studies that look specifically at the assertion that participating property owners report much less annoyance, we had those studies that we reviewed, and they did support that. There's always that in the back of your mind, but quite frankly, we don't know a better approach than to use the science-based peer-reviewed literature.
So you studied the methodology, you were satisfied that it was indeed scientific?
Yes. Again, the Health Canada study is, again, a very well-done study. Talking with the researchers, looking at their methodology, how they conducted it. I mean, I'm not a statistician, but when you read through all the data and how they analyzed it, I mean, I believe it is near the gold standard on how they went about looking at the data and collecting the data for that study.
Was this published?
Yes.
Do you remember where it was published?
Somewhere in the Acoustics Journal, the Journal of the Canadian Public Health Association published a lot of the studies, a lot of the Michaud papers. Acoustics Australia as well published.
And they were all peer-reviewed?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Well, you convinced me.
Commissioner Brinkman?
I just want to clarify my understanding because some testifiers have indicated that what we think regarding annoyance is that participating property owners are paid to endure the negative health effects.
Mhm.
And my understanding, based on what you've talked about, is because they are participating, their level of annoyance in some cases is zero aggregate annoyance or is much less, so that annoyance factor plays into what those negative health effects would be on them. Is that a correct understanding of how that works?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to expand a little further, I mean, as a public health agency, we would not let people accept negative health impacts for money. An example would be our air quality program. I mean, we enforce, federal air pollution control regulations. We would not let someone living near a factory be exposed to higher air pollution levels just because they work there or because they're going to be paid. And that's why, again, we had to answer that second question. Was the 50 decibel limit supported in the wind turbine noise data that we reviewed?
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Amundsen?
I had done some research too, looking at the World Health Organization, and just based upon the executive summary that they had talked about is that the average noise exposure conditionally recommends reducing noise levels produced, conditionally recommends that reducing noise levels produced by wind turbines below 45 dB LDEN as wind turbine noise above this level is associated with adverse health effects. So apparently what this means is that anything below 45 would be adverse. Anything above would be acceptable. Is that correct? Is that how you read that?
Well, a couple things, and we did review that information.
You did or did not?
Did.
Did, okay.
And right in the document says that it's not using the most latest data. It did not include, they did not look any of the Health Canada data in making that recommendation. I mean, also it doesn't differentiate between participating and non-participating.
Okay. And I have another question for, there was a question about possibly delaying this until we had something dealing with a 1 mile. I don't know if that could.
Can we hold off on that and finish with Chris?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
Chris, you've talked a lot about the annoyance factor. Did any of the studies that you looked at deal with some of these other negative health impacts? The headaches,
Yes, they did. Again, the big one being Health Canada. A big part of that paper was looking at sleep disturbance. And again, that was one of the times they actually objectively measured the results. They didn't just rely on self-reported results. They had folks wear an ActiWatch, which actually measures sleep efficiency, sleep awakenings, amount of quality sleep. And they did not find a correlation, or they did not find a connection between wind turbine noise levels and sleep disturbance.
How long have these professional monitoring, how long has that gone on? I mean, when you look at, you mentioned the studies now, how far back are they looking? I mean, turbines have been around for 30 years, I think we heard today. How long have these professional groups been monitoring these possible negative health outcomes?
With the Health Canada study, it was a year-long study. That's kind of the longest study that I'm aware of in looking at the negative health effects.
So I just have a couple questions and then a point to make. We had several people talk about that infrasound. I don't know if you have any information that you could respond to any of the comments made about those test fires.
And again, I think I tried to address it in my infrasound slide, is that some of the information that's submitted that does purport that there are, negative health impacts from infrasound, low frequency noise, again, not peer reviewed, or one I can recall exposed, I believe, folks to like 110 decibels of infrasound. So again, when we had our staff meeting, the decibel level isn't comparable to what we've read relative to wind turbine farms. We've seen at 300 meters 50 to 70 dB for wind farms, and this was exposing folks to 110 decibels of infrasound. So, I mean, the studies that do try to make that connection between infrasound and health effects, there are some concerns with those studies.
Right, but there's not been any studies related to wind energy production and infrasound.
Well, they looked at the Health Canada study. I mean,
right.
Again, they looked at health impacts from the wind turbine noise, and quite frankly, they did not find any associated with the wind turbine noise level. What they found was health effects associated with wind turbine annoyance.
The other point I wanted to make is, and this goes back to the original text that was adopted 3 years ago, and this has not changed, that this is prior to construction. A noise study shall be conducted which includes all property within 1 mile of a tower support base. The protocol and methodology for such studies shall be submitted to the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department for review and approval. Such studies shall include noise modeling for all 4 seasons and include typical and worst case scenarios for noise propagation. The complete results and full study report shall be submitted to the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department for review. And so I just wanted to point that out, that I know there's been some questions about sound modeling, and I think that's where maybe you can speak to it, is that there's one of the challenges with sound modeling is that there are a lot of variables that go into it, not only distance but topography, but also vegetation. And so I don't know if you could, kind of speak to that as well.
Right. I mean, as you mentioned, there are a lot of different variables that go into modeling, and quite frankly, we would have to work with a third party to help us with that. We're not noise modeling experts. So again, once the applicant would submit their methodology, we would have to work with somebody that's an expert in that field to make sure the modeling is done right. And what we've seen in practice is that wind turbine noise model, they will model the sound conservatively, and that may be a bit of a misnomer, but what that means is they tend to over-predict sound levels, because they sure as heck don't want to build a wind turbine and then the board gets noise complaints, and then we hire somebody to go out and do the noise testing and find it not in compliance, and then they'd have to depower the wind turbine. So again, that'd probably be the last time that modeler would work modeling wind turbine noise. So,
Commissioner Avery?
I think it's important for us to talk about what we mean by peer-reviewed and why it's so important in scientific research. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about that, or you want me to?
Sure, I will do my best. But so typically, papers are submitted in a journal. Those journals have standards. Then that information, that data that you talked about, is subject to review of their peers. So other scientists, other experts weighing in on the study's results.
And it is frequently the case that the people who are doing the peer review are anonymous. The people who conducted the study don't know who they are. It's a kind of a blind test.
Okay.
And without that, you can have colleagues
bias,
that have biases, and they have a relationship with the researcher, and you contaminate the whole study that way.
Right.
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, and I think we have a few questions for the county attorney's office. So to summarize, I think the question is that right now before us we have a text amendment that's been, oh, sorry. You need a test sworn in.
You need to swear in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So I guess the question is that right now we have a text amendment that's been, as an application from a third party that we have before us. And so the question was, or we were asked to delay action on that application until another text amendment introduced by another third party would have the opportunity to have a public hearing. And so I'll let you, I mean, I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it.
So, as you're all aware, we just kind of dealt with the same question with respect to the commercial feedlot public hearings that we had. Granted, it's a little bit different circumstances, but essentially, we're already in the motions of a text amendment with this specific section that we have, that's been through Planning Commission and now to the County Board today. Additional changes that are going to be coming before you, early next year, could have been mentioned and made at Planning Commission and come before you today. We would not suggest, and I see your face, but no, you're fine. Not changes in general to the entire section, just the specific section I that we're discussing today. Now, if you remember, part of the reason that we advised you guys not to hold up the special permit was specifically because of just your intent when you're amending the resolution, how that needs to be in good faith, how that can become a fact-based situation that has to be fully litigated. Now, there's nothing saying that you can't make zoning amendments and date them retroactively. So although even if you go through with this today, come January, you can always make, with the new text amendment that's coming, you can make those changes retroactive to a date in the past. So that's what we would suggest, just so you don't get into any potential litigation issues in the future with delaying your vote today.
Right, and I would also, so right now we do have another text amendment that's been filed.
Correct.
And so, but we don't have any special use permits that have been filed.
Correct.
And so we would have to wait until that or the board would have to wait until the amendment that's been proposed for the text, they would have to wait to hear the special use permit application.
Not necessarily. This would, again, be kind of similar to how you guys were discussing possibly putting a moratorium in for commercial feedlots, kind of be that same thing. There is that little window, but again, you guys, the Supreme Court has cases that says you guys can retroactively date amendments. So that's something within your power that can come in the future. But as of right now, today, I mean, of course, you guys can, like you did with the commercial feedlot, you can, hold off a vote, but if you need more time, but that would be another issue.
I think Commissioner Shore had a question, and then Commissioner Avery.
No, that, and it's kind of hard to hold this not knowing what the other item is even going to look like. A text amendment, a special use permit, change to the code. I mean, we're kind of holding this up. I guess I struggle with that.
Right, and like I said, the text amendment that's kind of in the works right now is for the entire zoning section, not just specifically section I. But again, it will include potential changes to this exact section. But again, those could have been brought up before today and before asking you to delay.
Commissioner Avery?
Procedurally, this would go through the planning process all over again.
Correct. Yep, it'd have to go to the Planning Commission first, then another staff meeting before would be the new board, and then another public hearing on it.
So it's very likely, or at least possible, that we could get a special permit application between now and process, once the process is terminated or completed.
Right, yeah, it's
The
possible.
Planning Commission and the alternative amendment.
Correct.
Do you know who has filed the amendment that we're talking about?
Yep, yeah, it'd be Ann Post with Baylor Evnen.
Commissioner Brakeman, that question.
So let me push this argument to the limit. What would prevent someone who wants to continue to delay the review of a special permit application from continuing to file additional text amendment requests?
Okay, if I understand your question.
Opening up, it's possible I would only open up section A with one request, and then I would go through the process and suggest another text amendment for a different section, only opening up that section. Is that possible?
It wouldn't delay a special.
With time between the filings, right?
Yeah. Yes, I'm just asking
with the
about
timing,
the process.
Yeah, it wouldn't delay a special permit. If someone put in a special permit tomorrow, and that would need to be dealt with, that would need to be dealt with within, they have their own time periods for review and going through Planning Commission and the county board. It just depends on more factors of, the timing and who files what and when, and how you guys decide to make your amendments effective, whether as of the date you vote on them, retroactive, going back, all of that.
Commissioner Shore?
You've made a couple of references to the retroactive.
Right.
So decisions we make in the future, we can go back, make those applicable to decisions we made in the past? I mean...
Yeah, you can retroactively...
I understand the retroactive concept. It just seems to be challenging in this situation.
Yes, yeah, there's some other factors, but just basic, without going into too much detail, it is an option.
Can you say oops and then go back and change it?
What do you mean?
It's not a legal term.
Yeah, that would, could you be more specific?
Legal term, no.
I don't understand. I cannot compute.
Any other questions for Ms. Holloway? Okay, thank you. So it's 12:18. I don't think we have any other staff. Any other questions for planning, health, or the county attorney's office? So it's almost 12:20. We still have to hear a rebuttal from the applicant. So what would the board like to do if they like to continue?
I would.
Okay, we will continue then. This will be the rebuttal by the applicant.
Did I swear you?
Not yet.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. I was looking at my watch to see if it's good morning or good afternoon. I will try and be brief given the hour. David Levy, Baird Home Law Firm, 1700 Farnham Street, Omaha. On behalf of the applicant, I want to try and answer a few questions that came up during the hearing. I want to address trespass zoning and this issue of the request for a delay. Mr. Kuhn is also here if there are questions for him, or he might have just a few words at the end. But again, we will try and be brief, and we are very grateful for the time that you've given this morning. There was a question about lease payments. I think Chair Wilchin, that was from you. What we can tell you is this project would pay over $550,000 annually in lease payments to the landowners and participants involved in the project. It would also pay a similar amount in property taxes. There was a statement made along the way that total property taxes paid by wind energy projects in the state of Nebraska thus far were $3 or $4 million. I think they were only focusing on the nameplate capacity tax. In fact, my office just did an analysis of that, and the number to date is in excess of $8 million in total property taxes annually paid by wind energy projects. Again, those are all projects that have been developed in the last decade. That's new property tax revenue. One thing that hasn't been brought up, but I want to make sure that the board is aware of it, and I want to be careful here because we're talking about a text amendment on a single issue that affects the county. But during this process, NextEra internally has looked at this very carefully, and given the characteristics of this particular project and this particular site, if and when they come forward with a special permit, they are committed, and they've authorized me to say this on the record here publicly, to implement what's called aircraft detection lighting system. This is a new and very expensive technology recently approved by the FAA for wind energy projects. And essentially what happens with this is there's a radar system. I'm going to grossly oversimplify this, but you'll get it. There's a radar system associated with the project. And at night, the red lights that sort of dot the perimeter of the project, those would be turned off unless and until that system detects an aircraft within, I believe it's like 10 miles of the project. Turns the lights on. Aircraft comes, goes by, 10 miles away, turn the lights off. It's the only FAA-approved system of light mitigation. Again, very expensive, but something that NextEra is committed to for this project, given its particular characteristics. Somebody asked why we can't guarantee that 37 decibels at night means a turbine will be exactly a mile away from somebody's house. Noise modeling, as the health department staff described, is done very conservatively. As they described, not only are you not going to model something exactly 50 decibels because you can't scoot that $2 million turbine over a little bit if you're wrong. So they're actually going to go down a couple of decibels. Those models also act as if the wind is coming from all directions at all times. And those models also look at the topography, and they look at the combination of wind turbines and how they might play off of each other, again with different wind directions. So when you get that, 37 decibels at night might be a mile away from a house. It might be a mile and a quarter away from a house. It might be a little bit less than a mile away from a house. It also varies with turbine technology. Some turbines have a different noise profile than other turbines. But when NextEra did the modeling and their consultants, engineers did the modeling at the request of the health department, roughly what it showed is that every turbine to meet that existing non-participant level would be approximately a mile away from a house. But it's not an exact number because it actually depends on the modeling. And just one other quick point. A couple testifiers talked about net capacity factor, about wind turbines actually generating, and they used numbers in the 18 to 25% range, I believe. In fact, projects operating in Nebraska have net capacity factors well over 50%. So that means that a 2 megawatt turbine over the course of an average year would generate well over 1 megawatt in terms of megawatt hours of electricity over the course of a year. That's often compared to things like coal plants. They don't run all the time either. They're typically down a month or more a year for maintenance and things like that, and their net capacity factors tend to be in the 70s. So we're talking a difference of mid to high 50s to 70s between a wind energy project and a coal plant. Really not relevant to the question before you today, but the information was so far off, I did want to respond to that. I want to talk a little bit about trespass zoning. First of all, the American Planning Association does not recognize trespass zoning as an appropriate exercise of municipal authority. And when you think about zoning and what zoning is and what happens when you zone and why you have the authority to zone, I think that makes sense. Every zoning action is an intrusion on private property rights. But the Constitution and the state legislature authorize bodies such as this to do that in the name of protecting the public health, safety, and welfare. If you zone farther than necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare, you're essentially over-zoning. You're intruding on private property rights more than the Constitution and the legislature have authorized you to do. That balance here, it's a hard balance to find. You have a thankless and difficult job. I recognize that completely. But that balance is what this text amendment seeks. Those who are opposed to this, who the literature shows are more likely to suffer annoyance at lower levels, their public health, safety, and welfare is different. It's a little bit different threshold. That's what the current regulations address. Again, we're not seeking to change that. I think that's clear by now. Those who are participating have a higher threshold for annoyance. They have a different public health, safety, and welfare in effect. And by holding participants to the same level as non-participants, you're essentially intruding on their private property rights farther than than you need to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And indeed, with all respect, farther than the law allows. So this is really, this seeks a balance that gives property owners a choice and gives a developer such as NextEra or any other developer a chance. This doesn't guarantee that they can build a wind farm in southern Lancaster County. If they can't get a significant level, probably 80% and above, of the property owners in the area to participate and become 50 decibel thresholds, they're not going to be able to build a wind farm. I think some of you may remember the maps from 2015 that showed at 37 decibels, there are literally about 3 spots where you could site a wind turbine, much less a wind energy project. A couple of comments on the map that you were shown. First of all, that map completely ignores the property rights of the person who actually wants to put the turbine on their property. And again, that's why trespass zoning is not a concept that is implemented. Land uses have externalities. If we live next door to each other, the leaves from my trees will blow over into your yard, right? The shadow from an office building downtown is going to be cast upon other buildings and other properties at some times of the day. That happens. That's part of land use. That's part of how it goes. And that shadow, you can go back to my earlier point, doesn't necessarily undermine the public health, safety, and welfare. Hence, it's allowed because you're looking for that minimum intrusion on people's property rights, that balance. And again, our suggestion is that this proposal finds that balance. That map also ignores a protection in your current regulations that any property, non-participating property, must have at least a 3-acre buildable site left. So in fact, the situation on that map could not exist here because one of the neighboring non-participating properties was, as I understood the map, completely covered in a decibel level higher than 37. They wouldn't meet that 3-acre criteria. So that part of it was missing. And again, it sort of ignores the property rights of that participant. The last thing I will say is with respect to the request for a delay. We strongly oppose that request. This is a single issue that has been through the process. NextEra agreed to a delay of approximately a month in the Planning Commission hearing and this process so that the Health Department and the Planning Department could study it so that we could work with them. We've done all of that. They certainly have the right to file that text amendment, and that text amendment will go through the process, and NextEra will participate in that process. I haven't had a chance to study that in great detail, but I have read it, and I will tell you there are a number of things in there that I don't know that NextEra will object to. Post-construction noise monitoring. First of all, as we told the Planning Commission, we have no objection to that, and if the board, in response to a special permit, wanted to impose that as a condition of approval, even though it's not in the regulations, that's not something to which we would object. But if there's a desire to put that in the regulations, some of those things, I don't know that we'll have a lot of disagreement, conceptually anyway, we may on the language. But there's also something in that proposal which is a setback of 1 mile from any non-participating property line. That's an attempt now to set up a whole set of arguments that is contrary to this process that NextEra and the board and the staff and everybody else have already gone through. NextEra, I would argue, has a due process right to get an answer on their proposal. Commissioner Brinkman, I think you suggested that somebody could keep filing text amendments and keep doing that, and they could. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. Could a company jump in and file a special permit request in between those? Sure, they could. And I know from experience in 2014 or 15 that the first thing that happens is staff says, hey, would you wait on that because we have regulations in process. It introduces a great deal of uncertainty that, again, it really is unfair to an applicant who has gone through the process and has exercised their due process rights, just like the Prairie Wind Watchers want to exercise those. So I would submit to you that not only would it be unfair, but there's really no reason to do that. Somebody tomorrow, if you pass this today, could submit a text amendment proposal to reverse what you've done today, or they might not. That's not a reason to not do this today. You could wait forever on that theory. So with all of that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, we appreciate your time. We would urge you to act on this today. I would remind you that the Health Department, the Planning Department, and the Planning Commission all strongly recommend approval. And again, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Kuhn is here as well.
Any questions? I mean, I just have a few, and I know that this came up 3 years ago, and you were not involved, but you were president, if I recall. But the question was, why locate the wind farm in this location? And I mean, I know the answer, but if you could address that, or
maybe I'll start, and if you want to add, there are approximately 85 landowners already participating in this project. Like, that's approximately the number. You need three things for a good wind project. You need good wind, you need willing landowners, and you need good access to the transmission grid. This site, as we sit here today, has all of those things. It's got a significant problem in that there's a zoning regulation that is prohibitive at this point. And again, that's NextEra. This proposal is asking only to give them a chance. It certainly guarantees nothing. But to your question, Chair Wilchin, that's why this spot. It's got the three things you need for a strong project.
Yeah, I really have nothing to add beyond that. I mean, that summarizes it well. The economics really of this project are the potential is enormous for a strongly positive wind farm here, and it's driven by those factors.
And again, without a high level of participation, literal contractual participation from the community, it doesn't get built anyway.
Commissioner Shore?
We could talk about participating and non-participating again, and we've talked today a lot about the noise component, but I also think there's the visual component, the landscape and visual pollution. When you are working with participating landowners to site a turbine on their property, how much flexibility do you have in siting that? And then the secondary question is, they're going to site it, I'm looking at the sunset, so they're going to site it over here, but then we have the non-participating owner across the road who now has that turbine in their visual field. So does that is that a way to increase your participatory rate? And that's, I guess, a two-part or three-part question.
I'm going to try to pull that apart, and if I misunderstood any part of your question, please stop me and try to correct me. As far as the visual aspects that we have to adhere to, really that's captured in the shadow flicker regulations that are currently in your zoning regulations. The annoyance factor for a wind turbine is really the fact that it would cast a shadow on your dwelling unit, and we're restricted to 30 hours a year of shadow flicker, which, just for some context, there's 8,760 hours in a year. 30 of those we could be creating a shadow somewhere on your dwelling unit. Even if we are creating a shadow on a wall that has no windows, that is still considered shadow flicker. So in other words, if you were to never see the shadow, but it's on the side of some exterior wall, we would have to capture that in the modeling and make sure that we're not exceeding 30 hours. But beyond that, really the predominant setback here is driven by sound. The 37 dBA requirement is strict enough to where we cannot site a turbine, and the model, the turbine that we asked our third-party company to model would be one of the loudest turbines we would consider for the project, and that showed that it would need to be. We couldn't site a turbine within a mile of a non-participant property. So as far as I'm not sure if that answers your question, but given the fact that you've got a 37 dBA requirement for non-participants, we have to be set back essentially a mile away from their home. Or even if it's a vacant property, even if the property is entirely vacant, we have to ensure that there's 3 acres of buildable space. And if we can't get someone to sign over a vacant parcel to us, we have to be a mile away from that vacant property.
Well, and that's where just to follow up on the setbacks for the turbine base, which was in the text that we adopted 3 years ago, for non-participating lots, it's the setback shall be 2 times the turbine height measured at the property line, or 3.5 times the turbine height measured to the closest exterior wall of the dwelling unit, which is ever greater, but at least 1,000, a minimum of 1,000 feet to the property line. So that's where, I think your point is, that's where the physical setback comes in, but with the 37 dBA, you're not going to, I mean, that exceeds the physical setback that we have.
That's right. That largely controls. I will say for context, I've worked on projects and regulations in, I don't know, 20 or 30 counties in Nebraska, almost all of them, and the GE manufacturer recommendation is a 1.1 times turbine height from a property line, so 650 feet, something like that. So your minimum of 1,000, sort of like, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, like your 37 decibel noise limit is the most restrictive and most protective, if you will, of a non-participant in the state with which I'm familiar. A 2 times turbine height requirement is going to be more like 1,100 feet, something like that, from a property line. But you're also right that really the noise setback is probably always going to be the controlling factor for a non-participant.
So you brought up the manufactured recommendation and that was something that was brought up again. That was something that was brought up 3 years ago as well. And at that time, again, the applicant at that time did address it, but I guess I'll let you guys speak to that.
GE, we almost exclusively get our turbine equipment from GE, and they have published a setback consideration document. It's public, and we're happy to share it with you, and therefore it be public information. And they recommend 1.1 times tip height as a setback. So that's where that number's coming from.
Right, but then what happens is that they will provide, in the modeling study, the decibel levels created by the turbine, and that's what the modeling is based on.
Right.
That's right. They provide a noise profile for each turbine.
That's noise profile.
Yep, exactly.
Sorry.
And the modelers use that.
Yeah, and that's where, because of topography, distance, vegetation, other factors, humidity,
Yep.
and a lot of those factors that we may not, know, but apparently we do have professionals that are very smart who can use that information to develop a model that can determine those setbacks. And like you said, it's usually more conservative because, and Chris made the point, which is, you don't want to make a mistake in that modeling because, it's very expensive to construct one of these turbines, but it's also expensive to decommission it, let alone move it.
You'd be looking at 2 other people standing here, that's for sure. The other thing I will say with that is recall also that these decibel levels that we're talking about are a maximum level as an average for any 10-minute period of time. This is not a situation where if I'm a participant, I'm going to have 50 decibels at my house all the time. That's just not possible, because of what you said, Mr. Chairman, which is they're going to model it conservatively. It won't get to 50 for that 10-minute average period of time. But that's a very short window of time. And between that and the way that noise works on a logarithmic scale, if you're close to that 50 or above that 50 for even a little bit of time, you're going to have to be way below it so that the average works out. So again, just the measurement itself, or the metric of measurement, is also very conservative.
You guys, any other questions? I don't think. I don't have any. Okay.
We thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, unless there's, I guess, before I do that, any questions from the board or anyone else? Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing for the text amendment number 18011. Mr. Clerk, would you please see the correlating item?
This is under new business 4Q, resolution regarding county text amendment, number 18011, amending the Lancaster County zoning resolution, section 13.048, commercial wind energy conversion systems, to add a condition to allow participating properties to have a higher noise level than non-participating properties, as provided in attachment A.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the text amendment number 18011. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Amundson?
I will actually vote to approve the amendment simply because 3 years ago, when we voted on the Volkswind situation, there was the primary emphasis was upon the health. It was based upon the recommendation by the health department, and there was a higher decibel standard and applied to both the participating as well as the non-participating. This is a different situation. I voted back in 2015 to approve the 3740 decibel limit. And from the testimony that has been given, as well as the scientific discussion, I believe that that would be fine, and that's why I will support that.
Any other?
I will be voting in opposition. To me, it was never about whether or not we support wind energy. Is citing it in the second most populated county in the state the appropriate place?
Commissioner Brinkman?
The proposal in front of us today is a simple change that acknowledges the scientific evidence that's been reviewed by the health department. The health department, the planning department, and our planning commission have all recommended approval of this project. We have spent the vast majority of today and this process talking about a lot of issues that have nothing to do with the proposal that is in front of us, but we will be talking about some of those other issues as we examine this additional text amendment and a project that is not yet before us, and that is why I'm going to vote for approval.
Commissioner Avery?
I, too, am going to vote for approval. And I just want to give some kudos to the health department. The research that you guys did is pretty impressive. And it was conducted, as far as I can tell, clearly within the bounds of acceptable recommended procedures for science. I believe what you have uncovered is probably true. And with that as a basis for my vote, I vote for science, and I vote for your project.
And I guess I'll just conclude that I, too, will be voting in support of this amendment. I know that there are a lot of issues that were brought forward today that were similar to what we addressed 3 years ago. There are protections. This is the text amendment. There still will be an opportunity for a special use permit application process, that if a applicant comes forward, that there would be additional remedies for the future county board to take into consideration. But I think it's important to note that the individuals who are not participating in this project, nothing will change for them as far as the issues that we addressed 3 years ago. We're not changing the decibel levels daytime or nighttime for them. They will remain unchanged. What we're doing is we're allowing for those individuals based off, again, as Commissioner Avery pointed out, based on sound scientific research, that it would not adversely affect the health of those individuals who would be participating in the project. So with that, again, I'll be supporting the amendment. Any other discussion? Okay, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Shore?
No.
Amundson?
Yes.
Avery?
Yes.
Brinkman?
Yes.
Wilchin?
Yes.
Motion carries 4 yes, 1 no.
Would you like to move
Commissioner
to
Avery,
adjourn?
would you like to?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Amundson,
You get to do them too.
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Yes.
Avery,
Yes.
Welchen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we are adjourned. Have a good week.